Boogie. Boogie.
Right. You're around in the 6:45, so
Yep.
Commissioner Hecker, whenever you are ready.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody was back, but I think we can begin.
I think everybody stayed.
Yep, thank you. All right, seeing that it is 7 o'clock, I will officially call to order the December 10, 2020 meeting of the Abington Township Board of Commissioners Committee of the Whole. And we will start with a consideration of the approval for the minutes. So I will offer a motion to approve the minutes from the Board of Commissioners Committee of the Whole meeting of November 12th, 2020. I so move.
Second.
Thank you. There's been a motion and a second. Are there any comments from the members of the committee? Hearing none, I will ask for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So the minutes are approved. We do not have any presentations this evening, and I'll remind my colleagues and those that are in attendance this evening, the way that the Committee of the Whole is structured is that we provide opportunity for public comment on the front end of the meeting prior to the agenda items. Residents have up to 5 minutes to discuss any issues related to the matters on the agenda this evening. And then we will move from there into actual discussion of the agenda. We have a rather robust agenda this evening, so I expect quite a bit of discussion. This is really a work session for the board to determine how the items that come before us this evening will proceed. We have options to decide to move these things forward to the full board for consideration. We can refer them back to committee or take other measures as we deem appropriate to ensure a full and fair vetting of everything. And with that, I will turn it over for public comment on agenda items. And I see we have one hand raised. If we could bring the resident in. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, hi. It is I again, and I am going to ask that last caller to look me up on abingtoncitizens.com, and we will straighten out the record, because that was an absolute falsehood.
Ms. Lehman, I'll remind you that the comment here at the Committee of the Whole is related specifically to agenda items only, and if you have that, I'd ask you to please get to that.
Okay, and so that's another thing. Number one, I also want to say that the minutes do not reflect what the residents, and so one of the corrupt things going on is if the residents cannot say that they were not accurately represented in the minutes, then you are not running a township that is satisfactory for the residents that elected you. Okay, and on top of not reflecting what we comment properly, you have a manager who has just said that the note taker can immediately destroy the documents and that the official record is going to be the minutes, meaning that also probably the videos and the audios can be destroyed.
So we've been through this before at the discussion of the creation of the Committee of the Whole, and I'd ask again that if you have comments tonight related to the agenda items that we're about to consider, please get to them.
So, well, the most important thing when you're trying to talk about agenda items is to have the rights to free speech, proper speech, and to have those reflected properly in the minutes as the permanent record.
Look, Ms. Lehman, you've made your point, and if you have any comments about the substantive matters before the board, I urge you to get to them.
Yes, I do. By removing our speaking rights, you have not allowed the people who are going to be impacted by the item that I want to address the most, which is the Willow Grove Mall. And you have actually allowed the Willow Grove Mall to again improperly present what it is they're doing. Apparently, they are going to be part of a transition-oriented development, and the residents should have had a right to hear that information in the meeting where they were given to know the first parts of the Willow Grove Mall project. A transit-oriented development is one that can get lots of federal money if they develop very densely within a half mile around a train station or a transit hub. And so the Willow Grove train station is right there. And we basically are talking about the fact that, you know, our speaking rights here are meaningless because we haven't yet heard what they're going to present and what your comments are going to be. And that's another thing that you need to change. But I have to say that it is really a shame that the residents don't understand this, and they don't understand that what's happening here is an entire rezoning of this property, which will put the development outside of the mall and literally right up against Easton Road. Residents have told you they don't want dense developments. They don't want them close to the road. They don't want them high. And this is going to be 5 stories high. I think I saw 85 feet in there. So those kinds of things need to be presented. This developer did not present that and then wants to rush to have you approve it. And you do not have to approve it. You have the ability to let the residents get all the information until they are satisfied and they tell you that they think that this is good for them and for their community. Everybody might not agree with me, but frankly, I think most of us, from everything I've heard, don't want more development and denser development and more traffic and all of those things. So we need to be able to have our commissioners provide us with our speaking rights and our proper records and all of that in order to tell you what it is we'd like you to do to represent us. And I would like personally for you to represent us by not allowing this extra development. Please put the apartments inside the mall if you need to put them somewhere. If the mall cannot survive without apartments, put them inside the mall in the stores that he cannot rent. But mixed use developments also have other consequences for the residents. Nobody here, when you make these walking communities, nobody here who lives in a house a mile or 2 miles away is going to be able to walk to them. They are for new people. They are for the wealth of the developer and the property owner. We do want the mall to thrive and survive, but it should be a conversation among all of us, not one person saying, here's how I'm going to thrive and I'm going to take your rights away. So I would like to see that process not go forward tonight, for you to restore our committee meetings where we have much greater speaking rights, and for you please to allow the residents never to see a text amendment go forward until they've had a chance to ask all their questions and get proper answers. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I do not see any other hands raised among the attendees. And so with that, we will begin the consideration. Oh, wait, I do see one. Could you please I see 2 more. Okay. We'll start with Mr. Murray.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Murray, 1035 Highland Avenue in Abington. I'm interested in knowing, when you have your discussion about township mandatory masking, if in fact there's going to be included in that discussion actual evidence-based documents indicating the valid reason for doing so. I'm very concerned about placing the requirement on the township police for looking for people not wearing masks. And I frankly have seen enough evidence that masking is not under all circumstances particularly useful, and to have the police looking for people not wearing masks and then enforcing violations through the police, I think is a burden on them that they don't need. And I think in any case that it would be useful not to give this the appearance of virtue signaling, that any consideration about mandatory masking is going to be based on science. I see signs all over the township about we believe in science. Science indicates that masking is not the be all and end all of preventing COVID, and certainly not in restaurants has it been effective. The very fact that our governor is now tested positive and apparently, so he says, been very careful, is all the evidence I need that all the restrictions that have been placed on the state by his administration have not succeeded in stopping the disease, and they've created tremendous problems financially for our businesses. And in Abington, my worst fear is you're going to have the police forced to enforce a mandate that I am not convinced by any stretch by science is worth the burden it's going to place on them and business people in the township. So I hope during this discussion, assuming you have it this evening, there will be some evidence-based rationale for doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray, for your comments. I did see one other hand, but it appears that that hand is no longer raised. I'll give it 1 second just in case. Okay, thank you. With that, we will turn to the consideration of the new business before the Committee of the Whole. Our first item, agenda item A, is to consider authorizing the release of the performance security escrow release for Crest Commons LLC and authorize the township manager to sign accordingly. And I will ask Manager Manfredi to provide a brief overview.
Yes, Vice President Hecker. As you know, when we go through a process of land development, oftentimes there are escrows and other securities that are posted. And when the projects are near completion or moving through different phases, the applicant will submit the proper documentation for what it is that is been done or need to be done. The township engineer and the zoning officer will review. And if in order, they will recommend the release of that funds as requested. And that is what has happened in this case with respect to the project at 2907 Jefferson Avenue. And that is why it is on this agenda for your approval.
Thank you, Manager Manfredi. Are there questions from members of the committee? So hearing none, then I guess I would make a motion that this would move forward for board approval at the January meeting. Is that correct?
At the regular board meeting, yes.
Yes. Okay. So then I will make the motion that this matter move forward for formal review and approval at the regular January 2021 Board of Commissioners meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item B. And this is for us as a group to consider approving the request for the township to subordinate the municipal lien under the Community Development Home Program for 205 North Hills Avenue. And I will again turn this over to Manager Manfredi for a brief description.
Again, thank you, Vice President Hecker. I'm going to ask Assistant Manager Waymeyer, since she has been handling this matter, to speak to it.
Certainly. Thank you. We cannot hear you. No. No, and you're not muted, or at least it does not appear that you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
Oh, that's odd. I had my earbuds in, I took them out, and now you can hear me. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
So this is a municipal lien on the property at 205 North Hills Avenue. The property is part of the Community Development Rental Rehab Program. The township received a request from a real estate broker representing the seller of this property, and the municipal lien on the property is in the name of the deceased father. One of the siblings is now the seller, and she's planning on paying her sister's closing costs on the property. And the family would just like to make this house affordable again, and they're asking if the township will subordinate the lien to make it possible for one of the siblings to purchase the home.
Understood. Thank you. Are there questions from members of the committee?
Tom,
Yes, Commissioner Thompson.
sorry, Commissioner Hecker. I just wanted to point out that,
Know each other pretty well.
sorry. This residence is in Ward 6, and they're a good family. And I think it's a family that's just really trying to move on with things. They've been dealing with loss for a little while now. And I would support moving this forward and taking care of business.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Carswell has her hand up.
You. So I have some questions about sort of the state of a number of our liens in the township. And the reason I bring this up has nothing to do with this specific family and their situation, but to ask the question about, so how many liens we have and how many dollars that represents. And I ask it because there's a property in my ward where neighbors have pressed us to do something with the next door neighbor's inability to repair their garage. And there are only so many options that we have. And one of them is to eventually push for that, to push for a lien, to do the repair work and cover that cost in the short run, which could be not such a short run, could be several years. And I wanted to get, before being able to really weigh in on this, I wanted to get a sense of how often this is happening or what's the scale of this, because I do worry about covering the cost of repairs and then ending up covering them and not recouping that money, especially in the event that we are looking at having to raise taxes or deal with other revenue challenges in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Carswell. Manager Manfredi, would
Tara, do you want to address this specific before I address the more broad question? If there's anything, or is there really anything specific to this? If not, I'll address the more broad question.
Nothing specific to this. I will just add that this is community development HUD dollars. So these are not township direct dollars.
thank you, Tara.
But to your point, Commissioner Carr, thank you, Tara. To your point, one of the things that we have found, so number one, there are very few requests for liens in nearly the last 4 years, but there have been more recently, at least 2 or 3 that we see coming through. Don't know if it's driven by life circumstances, interest rates, or just the fact that people want to get some work done. We don't know why. I wouldn't say that there's been a great uptick, but certainly if we're seeing 2 or 3 and we haven't seen any in a few years, that's certainly an uptick. The other item that we've talked about, and Ms. Murley from Rudolph Clark and I have discussed this, and she's recommended, and we're in agreement, that we really need to develop a policy because there needs to be a better understanding of how we're going to address all of these liens. And it's going to have to take into consideration some of the things that have been talked about by the members of the Finance Committee, Commissioner Vahey in particular, and the board members when we talked about the budget for the CDBG program. And I will say, I believe we're very close to a new director. So I would see that policy, as well as the other work that is important, I know, to the board, will be able to begin in earnest shortly after the new year. But one answer is we believe a policy is going to be necessary to address it more broadly. What's going to happen with liens going forward? We're going to have to tie that into a lot of the things that you've talked about with respect to how do you want to spend that money for repairs and other things. So I think it's going to be a multi-tiered street, several lanes in that street, but the liens would be developing a policy which would come before the committee and to decide what you want to do. The short answer today is we don't have an answer other than to deal with them incrementally as they come in.
Thank you, Manager Manfredi. Commissioner Carswell, any follow-up to that?
Did that answer? I'm not sure if that
No,
answered.
that's actually incredibly helpful. And I would be a firm advocate for a policy on that because I can easily see getting into a route down a road where different ward commissioners and conversations are happening around challenging properties or families who've hit really tough situations who can't be served by the community development dollars, and we do look at these issues. And I want to make sure that we have a fair and clear process.
Thank you, Commissioner Carswell. Commissioner Behe?
Just so I make sure I understand, this lien was placed as a result of the improvements made through the home program. Is that right?
Tara?
Yes, that's correct.
The one with the really long list.
Yes.
And if we don't subordinate this lien and we do require to get paid through closing, where does the money go?
So if that's the case, the money, because it's the community development money, it would not come back to the township. Solicitor Clark, I don't know if you can speak more specifically to exactly where the money would go.
As Tara indicated, this isn't township funds. We are the administrators of the program. So when these liens are paid, this money doesn't come back to us. It goes back to the entity that advanced the money initially. So by subordinating this lien, we are not losing this money. We're just allowing the property owners to move forward with what they want to do, and but the lien will still be there.
Does federal? I feel like we've had this discussion before, and I apologize if we have, but do federal regulations or statute require us to place a lien when engaging in this kind of loan?
I don't want to speak to the legality, but my understanding is, for lack of a better description, that the lien is going to be placed in someone else's name, that the lien isn't being removed. For lack of a better way to describe it.
Right. But it has to be done. It has to be done by subordinating the lien. Otherwise, they would not be able to transfer the property until the lien amount was paid off. So by subordinating it, it goes behind all of the other indebtedness of the property, and then the new buyer of the property will take that along with the other indebtedness. But to answer your question, Commissioner Vehe, with this program, the property needs to be liened, and we've had this discussion before about whether or not these are actually loans or liens, whether they should be recorded as mortgages or whether they should be recorded as liens. And as Mr. Manfredi indicated, it's something that he continues to work on with my office about the complying with the federal guidelines, but also having this indebtedness properly listed as to whether or not it's a mortgage or it's a lien.
Look, I have several questions. I think that they're proper to be vetted in committee. I know we've dealt with this before, but I have concerns that we've placed a lien on a property because we use our HUD funds to make an improvement. There must have been some reason we did that. I assume it's because of some requirement by the federal government, and I don't want to. Yeah, and I don't want to make sure that any subordination or any other action we take is in compliance with those rules. Do we have an answer to that tonight?
we believe that we are permitted to do this. We've looked at this and reviewed it, and we believe that we're permitted to do it because again, we're not exonerating the lien or or forgiving it in any way. We believe that in our role in administering this program, we are allowed to do it. But again, to your concerns, we can provide you with some more detail on this before our next meeting.
Yeah, I would like that. I don't feel strongly about referring to committee, but I would be open to further discussion in finance, but I won't make a motion.
That's okay. I mean, is there a time sensitivity to this that would preclude further discussion at the finance committee?
If I may, I think I'll let Tara respond to the time sensitivity on this. I believe there is. I think they've been waiting and they're trying to get this done. She can answer that. I think we're talking about now, obviously, if the answers you've been given with respect to this particular property are satisfactory, it would probably make sense to move forward with that. Tara, I know from our discussions that this is something that they really wanted to move along with. So if you want to address that piece, and then I can take it from there.
Yes, for the siblings and for the homeowners, they are anxious to be able to sell this to the sister and get their ducks in a row with that. So I did speak to the broker and they are very anxious to get this moving forward.
But there's no, so I understand and respect that, but there's no externally imposed deadline that we're working against or the sale would fall through or something like that. This is really the desire of a family to clean something up that they've been dealing with for some time. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Mr. Hecker, I think the only thing I'm suggesting, I'm sorry, Commissioner, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just a follow up.
That's fine. Go ahead, Commissioner Behe.
We're not passing this tonight, so either goes to finance in next week or it goes straight to the board next month.
Correct. Yeah, this is not approval. This is moving it to some stage, whether it goes to finance or whether it gets placed on the full board agenda for January 14th.
And if I may, just one more thing. I mean, again, I don't feel strongly that this needs to go to committee next week, but I do think we need to get on the committee's agenda for January a discussion about a formal policy on how to deal with these going forward.
That makes sense.
You're going where I was going, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So with that direction, first of all, are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? All right. Well, with that as backdrop, Commissioner Behe, if we do have a discussion at Finance Committee about developing a broader policy, are you comfortable if a motion moves forward to have this appear on the January 14th Board of Commissioners meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So then I will make that motion for this agenda item to appear as part of our formal agenda on the January 14th, 2021 Board of Commissioners meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item C this evening, where we as a group will consider a motion to suspend the process and procedures for appointments to various boards and commissions pending a revised policy to be submitted to us by the township manager. And again, I'll turn this over to Manager Manfredi for an explanation.
Thank you, Commissioner. So as you know, there's a policy that currently is in existence that sets forth how any vacancies or any positions on the various boards, commissions, and committees is filled. That policy is very specific. It lists timelines that I and my office have to meet in order for you to make the necessary appointments in January. Over the last, especially 2 years, there has been much discussion by many commissioners as to if that process needs to be changed in any way. We have everything ready, and in talking with President Spiegelman and Vice President Hecker in next steps with those, there seems to be some concern that we don't want to get into a situation where people who have decided to opt in and not be replace but stay on, and then others that we'd have to advertise. And there was enough discussion among members that they want to talk about changing this process, especially the interviewing component of it. So with that, I had mentioned it to the president and vice president that if you want to change the policy, we would have to suspend the rules because there are timelines within that that are imposed upon me to meet what's required of me. And then they would like a policy to be developed. And what I had suggested is because there are a number of commissioners who have concerns about that, that I would reach out to, in essence, start the policy process, do some data collection and information gathering, and then draft a policy to come back to you in January for your reconsideration. But more importantly, to, in essence, and I'll defer to Commissioner Clark if he feels that this is sufficient. But since there's a policy and a resolution that talks about what the process is, for a motion to suspend those rules and those requirements until you have a new policy. That's it.
Yeah, it helps when I'm not on mute. Solicitor Clark, anything to add?
I think Mr. Manfredi referred to me as Commissioner Clark, so I've been
I was correcting the record.
That's a downgrade.
Okay. Sorry, sorry, Mike.
What is before the commissioners is permissible regarding suspending this temporarily while you're waiting for the development of a new procedure. This is permitted.
Thank you. Commissioner Vahey?
Aren't terms going to expire in the interim? And what do we do with some of those positions?
Obviously, if President Spiegelman or Vice President Hecker want to answer that, but the positions that were most critical were the Planning Commission. There are 3, and there is also, I believe, 1 zoning hearing board. All of those individuals would like to be reappointed. There'd be nothing prohibiting under the current rules as I read them, the board to consider appointing those people in January. It would just be the other positions that there may be some question on, that they may get, that if you wanted to do this and change this, those appointments might occur 1 month later.
Vice President Hecker, if I may.
Yes, President Spiegelman.
Commissioner Vahey, just to expand on that. Actually, I think a lot of the other positions that are coming up are also ones where the reappointments as opposed to vacancies, and where the folks in question are definitely interested in being reappointed. This process, we sort of been working with under the current resolution, the current process for a couple of years, and I think folks have we've done as well as we could to execute it. I will give a shout out to Commissioner Carswell, who actually very bravely chaired that committee and, did an outstanding job, despite the fact that it was it presents a lot of huge hassles that I don't think were ever predicted when that whole system, when that procedure was created. They've made themselves evident now. So I think the idea is for Manager Manfredi to come up with something more streamlined, more logical.
Thank you, President Spiegelman. Commissioner Vahey, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I don't understand what we're trying to achieve here. That's it.
The short of it, Commissioner, is this: I'm required to continue to move forward with the process that is currently outlined, unless you tell me that you're going to suspend those rules. What has been talked with me about is there are a lot of complications in just proceeding in the same manner, especially with the timelines and the interviews. So what I said is I either need to continue on this path and get all the names to you, or you need to formally suspend and tell me, no, you don't have to do that while you develop another policy. It's really, I just need direction. In other words, do we continue on the same course where we'll have to conduct interviews in the next few weeks in order to provide a slate of people for you to appoint on January 14th? Or do you want to change this policy because of the concerns that various commissioners have made? It's really I need direction. Do I continue on the same course or do you want to change course?
So Commissioner Behe, I think what we're trying to accomplish here is both to ensure continuity of service on the various volunteer boards and commissions, particularly those where a vacancy would impact consideration and vote on matters before them, while also working toward a process that I think a majority of people feel more comfortable with based on the feedback that the manager has received. So suspending the rules temporarily pending a new policy allows us to more readily move to the reappointments that for which there's mutual interest in doing so, while we write a new policy around how we want to move this process forward in the future.
Well, I don't know whose terms are expiring and who is interested in being reappointed. I don't know if I would necessarily support that. I don't want to be in a position where we're having a de facto reappointment of certain volunteer
Well,
service.
there would still be the ability to review and make that determination. I mean, I think what we're saying is they're truncating the process given the time constraints involved, that it would be difficult to reappoint or not in January if we follow the existing guidelines, which have proven to be a little bit challenging based on the recent past experience.
And
So
no
you're
doubt
not
there-
being asked to vote to reappoint somebody tonight without the opportunity to consider the body of evidence before you.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay. Commissioner Bowl?
Thank you. I would love, and I might actually rescind this question if we're able to get some other feedback from, like, it sounds like some people have offered feedback, but I'm not really sure what that feedback was about what is wrong with the policy. So I guess my question is, is the policy what is jamming you up a little bit, Manager Manfredi, or is it the year that we've had and the inability to move forward with this in a timely fashion? Does the policy constrain you? And is this going to be an annual thing that is problematic year to year? Or I feel like the level of context that we have for this needs to be expanded just a little bit in order to more fully understand the issue. And then secondly, and related to that, for how long do we anticipate the suspension would last? In other words, how soon will we anticipate having a policy that could guide next steps here?
Okay, so number one, we are on our timelines and our targets. We have the list populated. We have everything. It's not a question of whether or not we can do what the policy is currently asking us to do, but there have been times in the past where, for example, there have been positions where people have asked to be reappointed, but certain members felt that it was necessary to interview them again. And there are those who felt it wasn't necessary to interview them again because they're a known commodity, they've been serving. And so we've had we've come up with different solutions to accommodate that. There have been situations where boards have been allowed in the past to make recommendations on who should be on there, and then they weren't supported by the board, and those boards felt that in the past they had been in essence able to make their own appointments, or who was their recommendation was acceptable. So there were different scenarios that have occurred over the last 2 or 3 years. The interview process. Is the interview process the most effective way to do it as we have been doing it? Should the selection committee be different? Should it be each committee reviewing those positions in certain areas? For example, how do you want it to be done? Do you want it to continue the way it is and those are the kinds of things that people would say, why are we doing it this way? Why are we doing that way? And candidly, as we move through the process, I was asking questions about what do you want to do about the interviews? And if we don't get interviews scheduled, we're not going to meet the timeline that I'm required to meet. And some of those, as a result of those discussions, the discussion was, well, perhaps we should put this in front of everyone and ask them if they want to suspend the rules, develop a new policy, or just continue to do it the way we did it last year with notifying everyone. And then we'd have to advertise for where there are vacancies. And sometimes we've run into situations where there were two people for one, or that they wanted to replace somebody who wanted to be reseated, which wasn't really consistent with the policy. So for lack of a better way to describe it, there are various people who have different views on the policy as it exists. And rather than proceeding as we have when there were known problems, the idea of board leadership was to have this discussion as to whether or not you want to just keep doing it the way we've been doing it, suspend those rules and develop a new policy, are the two options. I don't know if that provides any additional context, but that's in essence what's been asked of me.
Yeah. I think so. I think it would, yeah. I think I don't know if a new policy allows you to start the process earlier, or if you're hemmed in by the current process and needing to start later. I guess the timing of this is one aspect of it, but I understand that the logistics and workflow is kind of problematic right now. I can certainly appreciate that.
Yeah, Commissioner Bull, I think that is the primary concern at the moment. I think we can adopt a policy that sets forth any timeline that we want, as we're looking at the end of terms on various boards and commissions, but setting a workflow that makes sense so that everybody that wants to participate can participate. I mean, whatever we decide to do, as an example, and then I'll get on to, because we have a couple of other commissioner questions. The Environmental Advisory Committee, had a very robust process in terms of how they identified and brought forth recommendations for members to serve on that committee. It was not something that was consistently applied across the other volunteer boards and commissions. And thinking through what we want to do, and we may want to do it the same or differently based on what the volunteer board is. I mean, Zoning Hearing Board is a quasi-judicial body. The Shade Tree Commission is not. And so there may be different approaches that we might want to take or not. And I think that's really, having the flexibility to revise this in a way that is consistent with what our goals are and is comfortable to the 15 members of the board.
Thanks, Commissioner Hecker. I appreciate it. I think it's important to have comprehensive, well-articulated, clear, transparent policies in many regards. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Commissioner Schreiber?
Sorry, I had to unmute there. So is it possible for, it seems to me zoning is the one that we need to have. Am I correct in that? That's the one we have to have by law. Is that correct?
I would not say you have to have it by law. The board is a 5-person board. If someone is not appointed by their meeting in January, they will proceed with a 4-person board. They are the one, though, because of certain time limits under the municipality's planning code, that it is best to have a full complement on that board at all times, and not there to allow there to be a vacancy for an extended period of time.
Thank you. So what I was going to suggest is if we can, since the member of the board wants to be reappointed, if we can consider that as a yes or no, and then move to, I guess this would go to public affairs for discussion with maybe Manager Manfredi using our current guidelines and maybe suggesting where he might feel there's some alterations needed. And then that would just be a starting point for people to give their opinions. So I guess that's where it would go, is public affairs.
Well, so
my
Commissioner
suggestion.
Schreiber, I think there are two components to this. I think you're right that a revised policy that's in the works would go to public affairs. I think that's appropriate. Once that policy was ready for consideration, this motion that we're talking about specifically tonight would need to be authorized by the board at the January meeting in order to make this temporary suspension possible and to allow that work to begin.
If we suspend that, though, what I'm suggesting is that we go ahead with the zoning hearing board. So
agreed.
Yeah, okay.
Agreed.
That's fine.
Commissioner Hecker, would
Thank
you
you.
also want to, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Schreiber.
No,
Commissioner
that's
Hecker,
fine.
Would you also want to given, there are 3 incumbents on the planning commission who would like to continue, whose terms expire December 31st. Would you want to also consider them
Yes,
in January?
I think.
And I guess Solicitor Clark, is there any reason they couldn't consider those individuals if they wanted them to?
No. Much of this, what we're discussing tonight, involves an internal operating process and procedure. As long as the board majority is comfortable with a slight deviation or modification from that internal operating policy and procedure, it would be permissible.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would certainly want to hear the opinions of colleagues, but I think the key word is consider. And in my perspective would be, it would be appropriate to consider those reappointments so that we don't create an undue vacancy of that size on the Planning Commission, given the things that we're going to be discussing and have discussed that the Planning Commission will ultimately weigh in on. Commissioner Carswell?
Thank you. So I had inherited this process last year, this time last year. It was, I believe, only 1 year older in terms of a new process. And it had its moments that were a little clunky. It's certainly hard to get multiple people's schedules to line up for a night of several nights of interviews. It is a large amount of time for everyone involved. One of the items that I thought was incredibly valuable to my experience in that process was speaking to the chairs of each of the committees or commissions or boards and asking them about their input on the needs of their boards. And I think that's a really valuable process to continue. One, it was in part my political move on my part, because the process was new enough that many of those chairs had never experienced it before. They had served for far longer and had been brought into their roles under very different practices. But it was also a chance to understand the needs. So there might have been, for example, in the Planning Commission, a need for another lawyer, someone with a legal mind, or someone with a municipal planning or architectural background. Sometimes it's, we don't need another lawyer, get us something different. Or maybe it's to bring some diversity to the board or the committee, looking at people who represent different areas of experience in terms of where they live in the township. A number of our boards are missing some of that diversity in terms of residents from around the township. The other thing I wanted to add or ask the group is, the chair of the Economic Development Committee was, the conversation I had with him was an incredibly fruitful one in the early part of the process last year. They, like the EAC, had a robust process for picking their recommended people when they needed to fill a seat in the years prior to the current process. And I thought they brought a really good set of examples and documents that they used for that process. So I would encourage a conversation with them about their experience as well. And then the last thing is that I think it would be helpful to remind the board of the terms for the reappointments of the folks who are on, I believe, the Zoning Hearing Board and the Planning Commission, being the seats that are open that we need to look at, because I think that's an important part of making the decision. If we're forced to make a decision quickly, it's important to know that those people who would serve in those seats are serving for more than 1 year. That's my remarks.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Carswell, and I agree with you. And that all of that information would, in fact, be furnished prior to any formal consideration of those reappointments, which, if we are in agreement, would occur at the January meeting. Are there other comments or questions from members of the committee? Okay, hearing none, then I'm going to make a motion that we move this matter forward for formal review and vote at the January 14th, 2021 Board of Commissioners meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
No,
I'm not sorry, who was that, please?
Vehi.
It was Commissioner Vahey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One opposed.
Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item D, and this is for us to consider and discuss instituting a township-wide mask mandate. And for this, I'm going to turn it to Commissioner Ken Brodsky.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President and Mr. Chairman of the committee. I want to preface this discussion with the following. As many of you may or may not be aware, the last several hours, there's been changes in the COVID situation in terms of what the state government has and hasn't said and what they have and haven't instituted at this point in time. I have not had a chance yet because of my schedule to review what's been done at the state level. I've been given a brief summary of what's been taking place, but I haven't done that. The reason that this is on the agenda for this evening, and having said what I just said, is that this is an issue of public safety, health, and concern. Having said that, there's no hidden agenda. There's no any special meaning behind this other than there's a concern for the residents of the Township of Abington to make sure that everybody is safe and that we can do our part to actually go ahead and at least try and curb or at least stabilize the current pandemic. I don't think there's anybody that disputes that that's what the eventual goal is to bring this to a complete stop if we can. Having said all that, there is the national level, there is the state level, there's the county level, and then there's the local level. And I'm sure everybody's aware that at the county level, things are going to take place, and at the state level, things are going to take place, and we need to do our part at the local level. However, there is various components to this particular process and idea that should be discussed. The first part of it, it's a twofold issue. The first part being that, one, should there be protection in everybody being required to wear a mask? And I don't think I've run across anybody yet that has said, no, that's not a good idea. It's the most simple and effective way to help avoid the spread of a virus, which is basically airborne in nature. I don't think that's much in dispute. I think where the issue comes in is the fact of how do you enforce this and where you make this to become policy so that we actually help and move forward towards not making this a big spreading event, not making sure that this is actually something that continues to go on into the following year. Everybody's life has changed from this, and we get that. Having said that, I've done some research on the issue. I've spoken to various constituents. I've spoken to various medical professionals. I've spoken to local business leaders, have reviewed some of the studies that have come out. For example, one study that was nationally done comes to the conclusion which the 95% with 95 mask compliance, there can be 66,000 people saved. And if we were to institute mask compliance, then that's in excess of the population of the Township of Abington. And we've done our part to at least try and make the process along. There's other studies that show how much the wearing of masks can reduce the infection rate. And again, those are issues that we need to be reviewed and looked up and reviewed at this point. There's also ripple effects to be considered. But given that this is a fluid situation, I think what I'd like to do is propose the following. I don't want to have a discussion, or I do want to have a discussion, but not this evening until I've had a chance to further speak with folks at the county level and speak with other fellow commissioners and people at the state level to figure out where we're going to go, especially given the nature of what the governor and the state has done today. So I'm going to suggest that if anybody wants to make comments on this, it's great, but otherwise my relief that's going to be requested is one of two things. Either we come back at a different time for another Board of Commissioners meeting, or we push this up to the whole board meeting at a later date or a future time. I think I've also spoken, I do want to give mention that I have spoken with Commissioner Schreiber, Chair of Public Safety, and I've also spoken with Commissioner Vice President Hecker, and we've been able to roundtable this to the effect that we think it's a good idea that because it is such a fluid situation, let's hold this. It is a time urgent matter. Make no mistake about that. This is time urgency, and this is for the health, welfare, and safety of the actual township and the residents. But I think that given today's events, we should at least consider holding either an emergency meeting in the next few weeks or push this to the January meeting itself. So if anybody has any comments or suggestions they want to project, let me open that up for the moment, but I would ask that maybe we just push this for the moment until we see where things further develop. I would note one statistic I did hear today, which I find to be frightening, is that by January 2nd, 2021, there's going to be approximately estimated 362,000 deaths from COVID. Don't want anybody in this township or anybody, but anybody specifically in this township to be affected by that. And we've all been touched by this disease itself, but I think this is a time urgent issue. So having said that, does anybody have any comments, or I would refer back to Chair Hecker?
Thank you,
Commissioner-
Commissioner Brodsky.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, but thank you.
Thank
So then the idea would be that we would table this discussion for this evening. But before doing so, does any member of the committee wish to make any comments? Commissioner Bowman? No, okay. Commissioner Schreiber?
Yeah, I want to commend Commissioner Brodsky for bringing up this for discussion, and also for realizing that this might not be the best night to do that. I'm sure that there's other people like myself who have worried about things like enforcement and if a mandate is really the way to go on this, but it is a worthy discussion to have because of what's happening. So maybe at a future date about, if not a mandate for mask, which I'm not sure that I would be in favor of that, but having a resolution supporting other systems, things that the county might put forward or the state or whatever. So I think it's worth it for us to have a discussion. And unfortunately, it does have to be somewhat time sensitive. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I thank him for at least raising this as a point for discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner Schreiber. Commissioner Myers?
Thank you. Somewhat echoing Commissioner Schreiber, I would be very interested, and Commissioner Brodsky, in your further research, that you really delve into the enforcement of this. What I would really hate to see if this came to fruition is someone walking their dog by themselves and someone inside a house calling the police. Mr. Jones is walking his dog and he doesn't have a mask on. So please, in your research, we don't want it to get ridiculous. People do have to eat and drink. I know that we can't go in a restaurant as of Saturday, but we just don't want it to, if this came to fruition, we don't want it to get to the point of ridiculous. And I'd like to say on a personal note that I probably wouldn't have even entertained this suggestion of masks. But I just learned yesterday that my 91-year-old mother has been tested positive for COVID. So this has really come home. And for those that don't think it's real, it's real.
Thank you, Commissioner Myers. And I think, we would be in agreement with the discussion about enforceability and making sure that things like it didn't go too far. I mean, I don't think we have the authority to extend beyond what the state or the county would do anyway. And in some ways, I think there's sentiment from some folks that I've talked to about some form of resolution that would be in support of healthcare and essential workers related to observing compliance with wearing masks in public spaces, as has been mandated by the state of Pennsylvania. And I'll say one other thing before I recognize President Spiegelman. Earlier this evening, we had comments from a resident about science, and I think it was a really important point. And I would point everybody who's participating or who will listen in, there was a very good and balanced news feature in the scientific journal called Nature back in early October. And it's one of the country's foremost scientific journals, covering all of the research that has been done since the pandemic began, the challenges related to enforcing mask wearing, the efficacy of different types of fabrics and cloths. And so if folks are interested in immersing themselves a little bit, it's a highly readable article, and it can be accessed just Googling Nature mask wearing article, and it'll come up right away. With that, President Spiegelman.
Thank you very much, Vice President Hecker. First of all, I have to say, Commissioner Myers, I'm so sorry about your mom. My family will all be keeping a good thought for her and her recovery. I also want to say, echoing Commissioner Myers and Commissioner Schreiber's statements, I also want to thank Commissioner Brodsky for bringing this to the floor, because I think it's important that, if nothing else, that folks who are listening know that the situation, the COVID situation, with this, what I always refer to as the pandemic calamity on so many fronts, but first and foremost, the pandemic itself is so serious that now individual municipalities are having conversations like this. That alone, hopefully, hits home something for folks to really think about going into this holiday season. And I just want to point out, and I apologize, Commissioner Brodsky, if this was part of your research. I'm not even sure. I can't honestly remember where I came upon this, but actually might have been from Chief Malloy. But if you haven't already, which I'm sure you probably have, I believe Narberth Borough is one of the only municipalities in the area that has a mask mandate, one that's actually enforced by the local police and carries with it a fine. I want to say it's $15, but again, that could be pulling that out of the ether. But I think that's certainly something that's worth researching as well. Thank you.
Thank you, President Spiegelman. Commissioner DePlacido, did you have your hand up?
I did, but I think everybody just covered it. I just, again, wanted to thank Commissioner Brodsky for bringing this forward, and just hope that we have this discussion sooner than later.
Thank you, Commissioner DePlacido.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Vice President.
Certainly.
I just want to follow and tie this all together. So first of all, thank you, Commissioner Schreiber. Thank you, Commissioner DePlacido and Commissioner Myers, and also President Spiegelman for the support and bringing the idea forward. I do appreciate that. So that's number one. Thank you all. Number two, the idea here is not that a mask mandate is or isn't necessary. It probably is. The question is more difficult and requires a finer analysis as to enforcement. And I think that's where the issue, and that's where I think the disagreements may or may not come in, is open for discussion. So anybody that wants to discuss the issue as far as both parts of the actual global issue, I am actually ready to do that. Feel free to email me. I'll pick up the phone, talk to me, and we can actually do that. As far as the research is concerned, I've actually looked at various avenues. I've looked at CDC reports. I've looked at FDA. I've looked at the World Health Organization. And to briefly comment on the individual who commented earlier in public comments, I have not yet seen one medical professional, one report that says that mask wearing doesn't help. I've not yet heard one medical professional or anybody actually say anything against it. So it is science-based, and those are the experts. It's not my field of expertise. All I can do is read and see what's out there. And I can actually tell you that I've not yet seen that medical professionals saying, no, masking isn't appropriate or masking isn't correct. Having said all that, I will gladly share or discuss the data that I've come up with so far. The people I've spoken to are the individuals who are medical professionals, constituents, other folks, and reading what's on available on, not just online, but actually looking at the reports itself. I think there requires some coordination also at the county level itself. So I'm committed to working forward on this issue to bring it to a resolution that will, as best we can, again, protect the health, safety, and the welfare of the residents of Abington. And I think that that's what we're here for. I don't know that there's a downside to a mask mandate. There's little nuances that may go with it, but we can discuss that and flush it out and reach a resolution that will protect the health, safety, and welfare of the town's residents. And I think that this is what this is all about. So having said that, I'll further circle back with folks. Anybody that wants to reach out to me, please do so. Glad to discuss it. And thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, Vice President Hecker. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brodsky. Commissioner Ball, I've seen your hand go up and down. Do you have a comment or question?
Thank you. Itchy trigger finger there. Very, very quickly, I just wanted to echo the sentiments of my colleagues here and commend Commissioner Brodsky for bringing this up. This is, as the caller stated before, it lends itself to the potential for virtue signaling. And Commissioner Brodsky, I want to thank you for continuing to bring us back to the proper framing of the issue, which is the safety and welfare of everybody in the community. I think there's a great discussion to be had around that. To add to that component, I think that it would be wonderful to discuss whether or not a statement, a resolution, a strongly whatever it is on the continuum of what we could do would potentially help some of our small businesses. I know there are a lot of people who are making a lot of good faith efforts to remain open, to do due diligence, to be safe, to serve their customers really well. And if there's anything that we can do in a symbolic way, or if it is in fact as a mandate, to help them have the backing to know that the township is very supportive of their messaging to their customers, that a mask is going to help them remain safe and their customers remain safe. I think that's another excellent factor in all of this. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion. Commissioner Brodsky's been the leader on this, and I would support the direction that he wants to take. If you want to push this off a little bit, I'd be certainly supportive of that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowl.
If I may, one more quick comment.
Yes.
Commissioner Bowl, thank you, and I appreciate that. And I just want to make it clear that there's no right or wrong decision other than protecting the residents of Abington for their health, safety, and welfare. And I'm willing to make that open discussion. I'm willing to listen to ideas, and I'm open for this, because not just one person will make this decision, and not just one person will make this go forward. It's a combination, and this is where we need to collectively come together as a board to move forward to do what we can in the best way we can. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the support. I remain willing to continue to do the research and to continue to discuss it with whoever wants to discuss it. I'm here. Thank you. I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brodsky. So I've heard a couple of different things, so I'll ask for clarity. It sounds to me that Commissioner Brodsky would like to do some more research, not only about the governor's most recent order today, but anything coming down from the county as it might impact framing a discussion about a potential mandate. I've also heard a discussion about potentially a symbolic gesture through a resolution to express support for our local businesses and for our healthcare and essential workers in the community. And so do we want to do both? We could move forward with having a resolution prepared for the January meeting that does just that, while Commissioner Brodsky does his research, and we have a subsequent discussion about any further action. We can table this all together until Commissioner Brodsky comes back, or we can do something else.
If I may, I would probably suggest let's hold it in its entirety for the moment, because I think this is such a fluid situation. There's such a time urgency to this that who knows what reports you get tomorrow, and things may change. They may get better. They may get worse. I don't know. So that would be my suggestion, to hold this in its entirety before we move forward, because then the actual mechanism or method of how we actually decide to present this forward will also become an issue as well. And I'm not opposed to any of these ideas. I think they all require discussion, a little further research to see how it goes. So that would be my suggestion, to hold it in its entirety for the moment.
Okay. Well, then with that, I will make a motion to table this matter until such time that Commissioner Brodsky brings it back forward following the research that he's going to do. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. So now we will move on to item E of our agenda this evening, and this is for us to consider reapproving a 5-year lease agreement for 1220 Huntington Road between the Abington School District and Abington Township. And I will again ask Manager Manfredi to provide a brief description.
Thank you, Vice President Hecker. I'm going to this, Ms. McElveen is handling this matter.
Sure, certainly.
Ask
Ms.
her to
McElveen.
address it.
Sure. So the matter before you is renewal of a lease that has expired as of December 1st, 2020. This lease originated with the school district, I believe in February 8th of 2005. That went through till 2015 when we renewed it for a second term through 2020. If I can, I will, if there's questions, I'll show where this property is. Essentially, this property is being used by the school district for buses. This is where some of their staff park. It's located directly next to the school, and they maintain the property and indemnify the township for use of the property. We receive $1 a year for them doing so. And essentially they maintain this. I don't know if there's more to tell you. I can show you the physical location, but they're asking for another 5-year renewal through 2025. So if you renew this, it will go through December 1st of 2025.
Thank you. This particular property sits within Commissioner Carswell's ward. So I'm going to ask if, Jessica, if you have any comments or questions that you'd like to offer.
I do not.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments or questions from members of the committee? Commissioner Myers.
Thank you. I don't think this needs a lot of discussion. I think that we need to go through with this and that we should go through with this. So let's go through with it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing that there are none, I think we will go through with it. So I will make a motion that this item move forward for consideration at the January 14th, 2021 Board of Commissioners meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Do we have any opposed? Thank you. We are now on to item F of our agenda, and this is for us to consider the requested and submitted petition amendment to the zoning ordinance to include a transit-oriented apartment/condominium building to be permitted upon conditional use approval within the BC Business Center District at Willow Grove Park. And again, I will turn this over to Manager Manfredi to introduce it, and I think we will be having discussion with several people.
Thank you, Vice President Hecker.
Thank you.
Some time ago, in the few months prior to President Luker resigning his position from the board, he was approached by Preet and their council to consider this rezoning. As you know, any petition for rezoning is purely a legislative decision that is completely up to you. The applicant at that time posted an escrow for those meetings, which means that those fees covered for any time for our planner or our attorney or engineer are paid for by the applicant or whoever it is that is submitting this or may submit a petition. So people understand that there is no administrative cost to the township for this request or any reviews. At the time, President Luker and Commissioner Myers, who is the neighboring commissioner, discussed what they want to do. They were asked to speak with our planner for his input and thoughts on the development. Those were created. They crafted an ordinance. They were advised by the then commissioner and now Commissioner Vaughn that it was critically important to Commissioner Vaughn as well as Commissioner Myers to go through with the process that has been in existence for some time, which is to have neighborhood meetings. When other commissioners learned that it impacted nearby, they decided that it was important to expand that area. But as you know, there was only one neighborhood meeting and the process has not yet begun. The process, the formal process does not begin until such time that the application or the petition in this case is submitted to you for consideration and acceptance. That is what's in front of you this evening. I do not know if Solicitor Clark would like to expand upon that in any way, shape, or form, or give his views, but procedurally, that is why we are where we are.
The only thing I would add is as Mr. Manfredi said, this is unlike a land development, which there are certain timelines under the municipality's planning code. This is essentially a discretionary act on behalf of the board, whether or not to rezone a property. So we're under the municipality's planning code. Once somebody submits an application, the process begins and we have this normal standard process. With the rezoning of a property, it is up to your discretion, but at some point the board needs to decide whether or not to hear it and begin a formal process or not begin that formal process. So I think that's what's in front of you this evening. the determination as to whether or not to start moving this forward, which would be sending it to the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Solicitor Clark. Manager Manfredi, is there anyone else before I ask for my colleagues' comments and questions who needs to speak to this matter?
We do have the petitioner. I believe they are set up to be panelists, which would be Solicitor Kaplan. And I believe the representative from Preet is also present, but I would just say if you wanted to hear from the petitioner, I believe Attorney Kaplan is here.
Before we do that, Commissioner Vaughn, as this sits in your ward, is there anything you would like to say to preface the discussion before we do that?
No, I'll hold my comments for after.
Okay, thank you. All right, Manager Manfredi, let's proceed.
Mr. Kaplan, are you
I'm here,
there and
Rich.
available?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
sir.
we can hear you, sir.
Thank you.
The only Commissioner Hecker, I just want to note that Commissioner Myers has been a part of this process.
Yeah, I apologize. Peggy,
Since they came in.
any comments that you would like to make before we proceed with the discussion?
Thank you. Not really. We did have one resident meeting. A lot of information was put out to the residents. Unfortunately, time did not allow for a lot of questions. So I know that in this process, there will be more resident meetings so that they will be able to ask their questions as well.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Myers. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Hecker. So I'm Mark Kaplan and I represent Preet. I don't want to take an awful lot of your time because I think you know most of the background facts. But Preet is the major owner of the legacy malls in the Philadelphia area. Willow Grove Mall, the Plymouth Meeting Mall, the Exton Square Mall, the Moorestown Mall, and a number of other malls that were created in a different time, in a different demand, and in a different demographic. Fortunately or unfortunately, all of these malls occupy wonderful pieces of real estate in areas critical to the townships in which they're located. Most of us grew up going to Willow Grove Mall when we were kids or young parents, and we've watched the evolution of those malls. I've lived for the last 40 years between the Plymouth Meeting Mall and the Willow Grove Mall. And unfortunately, I've watched the demise of the Interior Mall, and I've watched Preet over at least the last 7 or 8 years attempt to resurrect, recreate, preserve, etc. The malls. It's an ongoing process. It has been made ever more difficult by COVID. So you know all of that. And we have, when we came into the township, we said, look, we'd like to do something to help preserve this mall. The national trend is to turn these malls that were single use assets, that is, they were all retail, into multi-use facilities. A lot of that has taken place. Everybody in the room knows who the tenants are in the Willow Grove Mall now better than I do. And what we have seen on a national basis is that to preserve these malls, we've got to bring another aspect to the table. And it is apartments. It's apartments that are about 4 or 5 stories tall, that have interior parking, that are integrated with the overall mall development. So we came to the township. When I say the township, we came to the manager and the engineer, and we said, we're here, we'd like to talk about this. How do we do this? The suggestion, however, was made, I wasn't involved at that time, that Rich Narkowitz be involved. The lawyers for Preet at that time drafted a proposed ordinance. Rich Narkowitz looked at it and said, no, I don't think it fits in with the format of the recently adopted overall township ordinance, and we ought to do it another way. My partner and I got involved. She's a planner, and we agreed with what Rich said. And we spent a number of months crafting an ordinance. Now, so that nobody misunderstands this, we have not said that the staff recommends the adoption of this ordinance. What I think is fair is that we have had a give and take on the type of ordinance that would make sense if the board went ahead and said, yes, put apartments there. In addition to that, Preet went out and got a development partner, a local development partner, Del Canto, run by Jennifer Nevitt, who lives in Plymouth Meeting, and Tommy Leonard, who a lot of you know, who is from Philadelphia and at one time was a public official in Philadelphia and very involved in many activities in Philadelphia. And they've committed the cardinal sin that developers commit. And that is they have spent an enormous amount of time and money to develop a plan in great detail of what they would build. The sin is that that plan, if you do not adopt this ordinance, is just wasted money. However, they were convinced of the quality of their product. We are convinced of the quality of the partnership. And we believe that when we get into the public process, we will be able to explain all of the things that need to be explained with regard to why this should be. And trust me, I'm not unmindful of all of the apartment projects that have been proposed in Abington over the last 10 years. You know, I represent Brandolini, and I watch Bruce Toll and his partner on the YMCA site. So I know that there's a little bit of fatigue in the township with regard to developers wanting to put high density development in. We would ask that the township look at this a little bit differently. And it's not as a scare tactic, but this mole animal is becoming extinct. And if there is not cooperation between the owners and the municipalities in a way to adaptively reuse the property, unfortunately, we're going to be where some malls have been. The Granite Run Mall was basically torn down. It went through a foreclosure. God knows what's going on in Montgomeryville. Simon has said that it's going to allow the mortgage to go into foreclosure. So we have a problem, and maybe I'm talking too much, but all we are asking to do, Mr. Hecker, is start the formal process. I'm used to hearing Ms. Lehman's diatribes at my clients' proposals, and I usually don't even say anything in response to them. But we have hid nothing. Everything has been out on the table. We did an over an hour presentation on Zoom. We sent out invitations to everybody who was within 1,000 feet of the mall. A number of commissioners asked us to give them the link. We gave them the link. We're an open book. And we would like, all we're asking to do is start the process. Take this ordinance and our proposal and give it to whatever you determine is the proper first step. Mike said the planning commission. My prejudice would be that your committee, your land development committee, but either way, let's go through the public process. And as Rich and Mike both said, you control the string here. The minute that you say, I don't want to have another meeting, it's over. So in the vocabulary that I've created over all these years of doing this, we're here for a zoning change. It's a begging. There is no leverage. There is no legal leverage. The leverage that we want you to consider is the continued viability of a very important part of the municipality, a very important part of the tax base. And as our partner Jennifer Nevitz said in the public meeting, the apartments in and of themselves will generate $1 million in taxes. So Mr. Hecker, if I can entice you to at least hold the meeting by offering another $1 million in tax, I don't know what I can do. So yeah, I have about a 12-slide presentation. I have Dan Herman, the Senior Vice President in charge of development for CREAT, who has much, much more understanding of what this is all about than I do. But I know that you guys have got a long night. Tell us what your pleasure would be.
And I would think if we could do that reasonably expeditiously, it would probably better inform the conversation we're about to have.
Okay. Let me try something. I brought it up on my, Rich or Terry, can you let me screen share? I'll try and bring our presentation up, I hope.
I believe Grace has control, if she would
Yeah,
make
I'm
that
trying.
possible.
It's not, I don't see the option.
That can't be
I've
done.
made it. He's co-host.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, if that can't be done mid-meeting, maybe Mr. Kaplan could send the presentation, but if you're able to do it.
You're co-host now. You should be able to. Do you need me to walk you through how to do it on your screen, or are you?
I'm sorry.
Mark, they've made you a co-host. You can either, if you want to take it from there, you can, or if you want us to assist you, we can, whatever.
Okay, well, Rich, I'm pushing screen share and I'm not.
So you'll press share screen if you select the words share screen. So click on share screen at the bottom. That will then bring up a pop-up which will display the various items that you have loaded to your desktop. Do you see that?
I do.
So now you'll select the PowerPoint, and then at the bottom right-hand corner, there'll be a button that says share. So once you select the page you want to share, then press share and your screen should load.
Okay, let me bring it back up. I thought I brought it up. I have it on my screen now. Jess, are you on? I guess Jess is not on. Okay. So I have it up. You're not seeing that yet, obviously. Okay.
No, you need to press the share button at the bottom right-hand corner.
Yeah, let me get back. Let me get back. I apologize for this. Come on.
Mr. Kaplan, were you looking for a Jen, did you say? Or Jess?
Jessica.
Okay.
Um,
There's a Jessica Welch with her hand raised. Would that be the?
yeah.
individual?
That's my right hand. Jess, can you do it?
Hey, Mark, I'm here.
Jessica, I can make you a panelist so you can present if you have the PowerPoint.
I believe that I do. Just
Okay.
give me 1 second. I'm so sorry. Okay, I think I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay, I'm gonna promote you, and then I will give you the ability to co-host. So.
And if you would let Dan Herman have access to his microphone, he can walk us through this.
Can
Mr.
everybody,
Herman
He
should
does.
be able to speak.
can you hear me now?
We can.
Good. Good evening. Thank you very much for permitting us to join you this evening and speak. Mark, thank you for laying the groundwork of where we've been and where we are this evening. I don't know if it's on your screen yet. Do we have the first slide? There we go.
No, we're on our way.
I'll give it 1 second for Jessica to pull up the opening slide.
Jessica, we're seeing your browser.
Yeah, I think we should share something else.
There we go. If you wouldn't mind, just back up 1 slide real quick. So can everybody see the slide on the screen at this time?
We can.
Okay, good. So let me give you some background, and we'll try and move through this as quickly as possible, but I want to focus on some very, very salient points. What we're here discussing this evening, while it is very important to Abington Township and all of you representing the residents, as well as the residents as a whole, it is not unique in our portfolio, not unique in the industry. And what we are trying to do is to continue producing and providing the best-in-class real estate that we have and taking it to the best level. Next slide, please. As Mark mentioned, my name is Dan Herman. I am Senior Vice President of Development for PREIT. I oversee all construction, development, redevelopment, tenant coordination activities, and on the redevelopment front from conception all the way through to complete execution. I've been in the industry in excess of 25 years and been doing this all that time. With us this evening also, next slide, please. We have Jennifer Nevitt, who is the CEO of Belcanto, who Mark had referenced prior to, as our potential partner that we're in contract with right now, and in working with them to develop what we think would be a first class, best in class, if you will, multifamily development that will complement Willow Grove Park Mall and be an asset to the community as well as to the redevelopment and further enhancement of the mall. Next slide, please. And Jennifer will speak in a few minutes. I think what's really important is right now, this next couple slides, and this one predominantly, is to understand and take the journey with us as to where retail was, where it went to, and where we see it going. And that's what's really given us the impetus why we at PREIT are interested in densification on our projects, bringing multifamily. In the 40s and 50s, we saw Main Street developments take place, the downtowns thriving as a retail environment for all of us to shop. As we got into the 50s and 60s, the advent of the regional mall came into play. With the advent of the regional mall, it led to a lot of development throughout the country, and you had the highway system that was running rampant and being built everywhere. And every place an interchange was being built, developers thought they could build a regional mall. And because money was fluid at the time, and there were a tremendous amount of department stores that were local regional chains looking to grow, the developers availed themselves to those opportunities. And as you got through the early parts of the mall development, you wound up in situations in most metropolitan areas where there was competition amongst department stores. And not beknownst to everybody, but some understood, there were feuds going on amongst those local families. And that's before you had a lot of corporate America owning the department stores. So what eventually happened was you had department stores that did not want to be in the same property as others. Well, you had the national chains of JCPenney and Sears. Specifically in the Philadelphia region, you had Wanamaker, you had Strawbridge and Clothier, and various Lit Brothers and various other regional department stores, that there were fights going on between each other and limited where they could be as co-tenants. So what winds up happening is developers saw opportunities to take the groups of tenants and go build malls in other places where you would normally have taken all of the department stores and made one massive regional mall akin to a King of Prussia to what you have today. And you had a bifurcation of the market taking place. Bifurcation took place very, very well. It was predicated on tremendous residential growth, which took place most places, but a lot of places it never took place, or it was bypassed. And so you jump to the 70s and 80s where the mall business continued and a number of tenants started evolving. We called them big box tenants, and because they became what we called category killers. And whether it was in the sporting goods, whether it was pet supply, it was home improvements, whether it was arts and craft supplies, you run down the list and you can name those tenants whom you all remember. Some exist today and many don't exist today at all. They were gobbled up by others, or they went out of business. And while they were doing that, they were chipping away at adding value in terms of how much sales were going on, but they were also taking pieces away from the department stores, as well as the small shop retailers inside the mall. And it forever changed the platform, both for the regional mall, and now you had the open air center business that began to thrive. And in the 1990s, you then saw a proliferation of this massive development that went on with big box power centers, where it was a lineup of 5 or more of the junior anchors and adding to it possibly a Target or a Walmart. Kmart had almost seen its day come and go already. And so you saw further bifurcation of the market, which again, those strong regional malls that were good continued to do good. Those that had problems, those problems began to show themselves in a much greater light. And we in the mall business needed to continue being relevant. And during those days, we started adding uses to the malls that were never permitted in the early days, like a theater. In the early days of a mall, you might have had a 1 screen or 2 screen in the mall, but most theaters didn't want it because people were concerned about losing parking spaces and scaring people away from being able to come shop. And mall parking was built back in those days, at least 5 cars per 1,000. And today you would love nothing more than to be able to bring that many people to the property. You know, as we split up the retail environment and created other places to shop, malls didn't need all that parking. And so you saw development of the periphery, you saw other uses being added to it. And you get into the 2000s, and you see all the other lifestyle centers, Main Street developments, et cetera, where retail again changed. And you saw a number of the better quality, ready-to-wear apparel moving into the Main Street, if you will, the reenactment of the downtown in a suburban location. And in some places it was done extremely well. In other places it was done because of the tenants wanting to grow rapidly and add new stores. And you can see across the landscape through America where it was successful, and places today where it struggles because while it was well conceived at that moment in time, it didn't have fundamentals to make it last into perpetuity. And so you look at Willow Grove, next slide, please. Over the years, Preet has invested huge sums of money back into this platform, taking former Strawbridge and Clothier and adding a Cheesecake Factory, adding Nordstrom Rack, adding JCPenney. Next slide, please. And progressively re-tenanting what we could within the mall, and all to bolster up the better quality tenants that we had there. and also add to and provide other tenancies that would resonate with the residents and also provide longevity to the mall. And as we're looking at it in the past, couple of years with the proliferation of bankruptcies for inline tenants, the amount of tenants we have to work with, that pool continues to shrink. And those new tenants that are coming online that are being converted from clicks, if you will, on the internet and becoming bricks and mortar stores where they're realizing they do have a need to be on the platform, the size of those stores is much smaller than we had found with most of the other ready-to-wear apparel stores in the mall. So what happens is you're faced with a lot more GLA, gross leasable area, within the mall. And we needed to continue being very creative in terms of uses that we're bringing into the mall, which, as you can see, we've added a lot more restaurants to the mall here and put them within the mall and not on the periphery. We hope to pursue entertainment, and we've had our problems with the entertainment side of it. We've added value and other apparel to it. And so we've continued to try and reinvent Willow Grove Park Mall. And we're at a crossroads where we believe that not only here, but at other assets we're working on actively right now, and you can find it across the country with all the other mall developers, where we're willing to reinvest money. We believe that we need to continue creating the place that it was before. And part of that incorporates by adding multifamily to it, adding residential.
Mr. Herman,
There's a
if I
couple
might,
things.
I don't mean to interrupt, but if we could get to the substance of what you're proposing, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. The next slide shows an area that we have identified that we believe would work very well for multifamily. And in the next slide, there's a couple bullet points we think that's very important, that we talk about what's happened through the 80s and the standards no longer being the way they were, trying to create a campus environment and continuing to reinvest in the asset. And we believe that advancing this will both help with the renewal and revitalization of the development that was once the town center, and believe that it will bring it back as well. The next slide shows the location of where we're proposing it, which is in the Bloomingdale's parking field remote and proximate to the existing stormwater management area, which we think would be an amenity. And there's three really strategic things that make this property different than most others. Its location, obviously, to the interstate system, but more importantly is the walking distance to many, many employers that are here, as well as the walkability to the public transportation. And if I may, for a second or two, have Jennifer jump on and just walk you through the product they're proposing, adding to the parking field there in Bloomingdale's. Okay. Jennifer, are you with us?
So Ashley, I believe that may be okay. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Somebody's got to let her speak.
Can you hear me at this point?
We can.
Yeah.
She's transitioning in.
Yeah.
Please proceed.
Thank you so very much. I kept raising my hand, hopeful that somebody would see it at the lower portion. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Nevitt. I'm the CEO of Belcanto. Belcanto is a Philadelphia corporation, and we are a hometown team. When Preet sent all of their mall opportunities out into the national forefront, we competed with national developers of the highest quality in the multifamily arena. And we were fortunate to be awarded the opportunity to share our concepts and our ideas with Preet at Willow Grove. I happen to pretty much live in Abington Township the majority of my Saturdays at your Target. I'm very, very familiar with that particular township. And we were thrilled that we were awarded this particular mall of the 7 malls that we went through the process to meet and greet with Preet to show our concepts. Next slide. I don't know if I can. Thank you, please. Yep. Thank you. So we are a privately held firm. We are one of probably 1 in 100 multifamily real estate development firms in the United States that are led by a female. And we take a real detailed consistency. Tom Leonard, as Mark replied to Tommy Leonard, literally born and raised in Philadelphia, has an intensity of expectation of detail and brilliance that he insists that we execute on. This is an example of the type of interior housing that we provide in our common areas for our residents. And you can see that literally every detail down to the light switch is something that we make a strong decision on. Next slide, please. I think it's important to note that Belcanto will invest over $500 million in multifamily real estate assets in the United States in 2021. And we have assets in Nashville and Raleigh. But Tom Leonard is absolutely committed to capital reinvestment in his hometown. So as you can see, this opportunity absolutely aligned to his core values of reinvestment into the hometown team. The, again, estimated from the job creation alone is 440 jobs as we develop and build those buildings. It's 155 jobs that actually will consist for recurring to operate those buildings. Our annual reoccurring estimated property tax bill that we will be investing in Abington Township and their success will exceed $1 million. That's for 365 apartment homes. Our approximate hard costs are $73 million, and the total project cost will exceed $100 million of the $500 million of capital we plan to invest in the United States in 2021. This is a significant project in our portfolio. More importantly, because it's in the backyard of our chairman of the board, Tom Leonard, there is an amount of detail and a secondary team. As Mark has mentioned, we have already committed and invested and spent over $350,000 with no promises, no guarantees, to make certain that we really did the detail it takes to design beautiful housing that's responsible and that is well managed. Next slide, please. So what we have today is a parking lot, and I actually shop more often at Willow Grove than I do at Plymouth Meeting. I've been in this parking lot for the last 18 years of my life. I particularly park at the Bloomingdale's exit because egress and ingress is easier. But this infusion of that mall space that's currently parking, please know that our apartment property, it parks within the circle of the building, of the dimension. And so it has a very, very strong protection of more parking so that it looks really beautiful and it's just not additional hard surface parking. Next slide, please. So what you see now is the imprint of the image of the building in a virtual dimension that, again, sets in right there at Bloomingdale's. You'll see that the parking structure is somewhat like the concrete box that appears in the center of that donut of those buildings. And the beauty of this parking structure, again, I've been in multifamily housing for 40 years. I speak at Urban Land Institute annually on the responsibility of multifamily development. Our residents will park at the exact level that they will live. They don't have to go up and down elevators. I think it's very important to make certain that I share with each of you that when COVID hit, we knew immediately that we had to go back and redesign our floor plans to show work at home coves, areas where we were going to have a lot of out learning with, you know, the whole community being home all of the time. So when you look at, we didn't just take a floor plan off the shelf, we are preparing. You look at the cities right now and the migration out of Philadelphia proper. God love Philadelphia, God love their tax base. But we know that the apartment occupancies in Center City are falling. New York City alone's migration is 20% out already. The suburbs are where the abundance of the Philadelphia MSA is going to prosper. And this particular location is one of the best.
Thank you, Jen.
You're
Mr. Hecker,
Yes, sir.
I hope we gave you a full enough presentation without taking too much of your time.
Well,
And I know you guys haven't even had time for dinner yet, so we'll try and get out of your hair.
Well, we appreciate the presentation. Thank you. And I think what we're going to do now is open this up for discussion among the committee members. And I'll again ask Commissioner Vaughn if you'd like to make comments now, or if you want to wait till other commissioners have commented. Your call.
I would like the other commissioners to speak and then I'll speak.
Okay, that's fine. So I will entertain comments and questions from my colleagues.
Commissioner Bowman has his hand raised.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Bowman. I can't see him in my line of sight. Commissioner Bowman, please proceed.
Thank you, Vice President Hecker. If the choice is between doing nothing or letting them start down this road, for me, it's clear we have to let them start down this road. I support the project, generally speaking, and if it needs to be fine-tuned or discussed and gone through more calibration, that's fine. But I thought Mark's presentation summed it up. I'm here 60 years. I'm 60 years old. I've seen them all from the beginning. We all know what he said is true. You know, we got to be real, and we need them all. And if he can bring more, you know, money to our tax base, we need that too. I'd like to see it. The people that have responded to me on Facebook have been positive, and I don't fear it one bit. And I'm prepared to move it forward in any way, shape, or form. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowman. Commissioner Weingrad.
Thank you, Commissioner Hecker. I don't know exactly how to start here, but the first question is process. Where is, just as a general, where is this supposed to go? I think that there's a lot to be said about this process being public, that the public have an opportunity to be heard. So my first question is, where does it go for the public to be heard? I know that the first neighbor meeting didn't get a lot of questions from the public, and it's very important that the public be able to speak. So that's my first question. Second question is, what are we supposed to do here? I mean, I read the proposed text amendment, and to be quite honest, I have a lot of problems with it. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be discussed. And it doesn't mean that it shouldn't at least be discussed and go forward. So, and I don't want to get into the nuances of the text amendments, because again, I have a number of issues with them.
Yep.
Perhaps those first two questions could be asked.
Certainly, Commissioner Weingrad, and I think they're related, right? And I will defer to Manager Manfredi and Solicitor Clark. I think ultimately, though, we will decide as a body here tonight where it goes with advice and counsel from the manager and the solicitor. So I'll start with you, Manager Manfredi.
Solicitor Clark and I have discussed this, and because it's a petition for zoning amendment, I'm going to defer to Solicitor Clark.
So I think it's up to your, again, the word of the night, your discretion as to where you want this to go next. I would suggest that since this is a text amendment, that both the County Planning Commission and the Township Planning Commission will need to review this. Obviously, Mr. Narkowicz from the Montgomery County Planning Commission has been involved throughout the project, so they have sort of had a preview of this. Mr. Kaplan had indicated at one point earlier that he would prefer that this go to the committee, where there could be a more detailed review of the zoning amendment and a more detailed review of the project itself. And again, I always want to point out here is, by approving the text amendment, the applicant will still need to go through land development. By approving the text amendment, you are approving that this is in essentially a permitted use, but they will still need to go through the land development process. So that is why, again, I think that they're going to be coming back to you multiple times over the next, I'll say, year. So perhaps getting it to the planning commissions for their review and for might be the one way to proceed. Although again, Mr. Kaplan would rather it come to the land use committee.
Well,
But it's
Mike,
within your discretion.
Mike, can you hear me, Mike?
We can hear
I
you,
certainly
sir.
can.
So I think there is one thing that has not been clear. Under the municipality's planning code, there is a very, very defined procedure on how an ordinance is adopted. And it requires that when the municipality has basically decided on the form of the text amendment, that document must be sent to the Township Planning Commission and the County Planning Commission. And each of those commissions has to be given at least 30 days in which to make its comments. After that 30-day period, the board, the Board of Commissioners can schedule a public hearing at which it considers the adoption of the ordinance and then ultimately votes. Now that's the required procedure. And no matter what else is done in the procedure, that has to take place. So our suggestion has been that send this to your land development committee and let's get all of the professionals around. Let's have as many meetings and discussions in public and talk about the provisions of the ordinance. If we get to the point where there's consensus on the content of the ordinance and that the process could move forward, then we would enter into that formal process where the ordinance would be sent to the County Planning Commission and the Township Planning Commission. And the discussions at the Township Planning Commission is not necessarily once and done. It's however long it takes until the governing body is satisfied with all that it hears that it should start the final leg, which is to send the finalized ordinance to the two commissions and then ultimately hold a hearing. Mike and Commissioner Hecker, what I'm trying to say is we're just starting on a journey, and the journey will be determined by the response and the questions that are raised. We're not trying to do this in some 1, 2, 3 fashion. I've spent enough time in Abington Township to know the process and that this is going to have to be vetted. So I just wanted to make the distinction, Mike, between what is absolutely required from the formal MPC process, from all of the other discussion that is totally at the discretion of the board and the planning commission.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Duly noted. Solicitor Clark, do you have any comment and response? And then I want to go back to the manager before taking additional commissioner comments.
No, I think Mr. Kaplan's points are valid, and maybe I was presuming a desire on the board's part and possibly Mr. Kaplan's part to get a more the review of the ordinance. But it sounds as if what Mark is saying is that they want to be able to present this to the board and to get the full feedback on that. So I can appreciate what he's saying, and I think that makes sense as far as that following that process.
Okay, thank you, Solicitor Clark. Manager Manfredi.
Thank you, Mr. Hecker. I believe what I heard at the outset of Commissioner Weingrad's comments was that the Planning Commission
is eager, ready, and willing to assist, vet, review, consider, and offer opinions on this amendment at the outset of this process. And they're experienced. They have been through many plans. They are an opportunity for the public to have a say prior to it coming back to the board. There would be nothing prohibiting or precluding the land use committee at any point in time when it comes back to the board for doing a drill down on what was recommended by the planning commission. It might actually help to have that kind of input from the public early in the process, to have a product that is in front of you that is something you can fine tune as well. And I believe that's where Commissioner Weingrad was going earlier when he brought that up about process. It should go to the planning commission. It's not to take the place of what the MPC says about it being referred by the board to the planning commission. And as Mr. Kaplan clearly outlined it, as Solicitor Clark clearly agrees with, we're talking about process in terms of public input. And I think the first question,
if I could jump in. Yeah, I mean, that's the question I was asking. And, you know, and in listening to this, that's what I think would be the best, route forward to gather information, see what the planning commission has to say with public input, then going to perhaps land development to really drill down on something that could work. So yes, thank you, Management Freddie. That's where I was going. And as I understand, the MPC requires that this go through the planning commission. I guess it's up to us to determine, you know, at what stage. And my vote would be for earlier rather than later. So thank you.
Understood. Thank you, Commissioner Weingrad. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Commissioner Hecker. I actually support moving this proposal onto the planning commission. I think it would be beneficial for us as a board and as a land use committee to get the comments back from the planning commission before hearing from the developers and residents. I think having those comments will provide us with some guidance, will inform our own line of questioning, and I think it would be beneficial to us, and I think it'd be beneficial to the project to move forward in that direction. So again, I would recommend that we move this to planning commission.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Brodsky.
There you go. Unmute that. Thank you, Commissioner Hecker. Two quick questions for council who made this impromptu presentation for this evening. What's your definition, or what do you think your burden of proof is to get this through? What's your understanding of the burden of proof?
Is that to me?
That's to you, Mr. Kaplan.
Well, I don't, in the technical sense, Mr. Brodsky, I don't have a burden of proof. In that this is totally a legislative decision. And the burden of proof is to satisfy the 15 or 16 of you that this is in the best interest of the township, however you define that. I used my favorite word before. A zoning change is begging. I don't have a right. I don't have any, you have no obligation to hear it. So this is, I got to satisfy and Dan's got to satisfy whatever you believe is in the best interest of the township. Now, you've already heard what I think that is, and it is the preservation of a very important part of the township. You either agree with that or don't. If you agree with that, then we're on a cooperative basis, and how do we do it?
Understood. I'm not commenting on the substance of the project. I'm not commenting on the merits of the project. I'm just trying to get into what your thought process is in terms of what you have to do to convince us as an entire board or at least a portion of the board to move this project forward in whichever direction it takes. So I'll hold that for the moment, as I understand your answer that you have no burden of proof, which makes this entirely discretionary. If I'm mistaken in my interpretation of your answer, then tell me, but you think it's entirely discretionary.
No, you've got total discretion here.
That's what I said. It's totally discretionary. Let me move on to a separate issue. And you use this word, and I'm going to ask you to drill down on this definition. You used the word early on in your presentation, many moons ago. I don't know, what, an hour ago, whenever you started. So you use the word different. And what's your definition of different?
I'm sorry, I don't remember in what context
it was early on in your presentation, about, I don't know, 40, 45 minutes, whatever it was, however long ago it was, that you used the word different, and you used that in, those were your comments. And I specifically picked out the word different. What did you mean by different? What's your definition of different?
I use a different word that I think is a very overused word, but is appropriate here. And that word is unique.
I didn't ask you about the word unique. You used the word different, and I'm trying to get an understanding of what you meant by the use of the word different. Not you meant to use a different word. You used the word different in describing this project, or describing what you had here. And I'm trying to understand your comments, your thought process, which would help me further evaluate what this is all about. So if you could drill down on that, what you meant by the definition of different. Or if you'd like to think about it and review the tape at some point and get back to me, that's fine. I'm more than happy to listen to that.
Ken, what I am saying is that I guess I'm trying to rehash what I said. In a lot of instances, when I present a major project to a municipality, it's usually or historically been on an undeveloped piece of property. And
if I may interrupt for a moment, I'm not asking you for a course of history or what you normally mean in a unique situation. I'm asking you to drill down on this one. I don't want to belabor this point. I just want to.
What's different about?
I don't want to. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Keep it brief, please.
What's different about this is that 30 years ago or 40 years ago, the Hankins sold the property to Ronnie Rubin, and Ronnie Rubin developed this. We lost the Willow Grove Park that I used to take the 6 trolley to, and we got a mall. And we had a very, very, very successful mall for years and years. What's happened is, and what's different now is the forces that were in existence back then, when that was a successful mall, have changed completely. The forces are different now. And if you believe that this is a partnership between the owner of this mall and the township that have common interest, that's what's different about this, Commissioner Brodsky.
Okay, I'll leave it at that for the moment. I don't want to belabor this because we have other issues to get on to, so I'll refrain at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner Brodsky. I don't see other commissioners' hands raised, but I'm going to ask any colleagues that wish to speak to step up now. Commissioner Myers.
For a second, I forgot how to unmute. Thank you. I'm certainly not going to speak to whether this should go to Planning Commission or right to land development. There are certainly others on the board that would better make that decision than I would. Like Commissioner Bowman, I would really like to see this project move forward. Doesn't mean that it'll move to the end, but I would like to see it move forward because I, like others, is very concerned about the future of the mall. And they spoke tonight that this would certainly help the longevity of the mall. And if we, Abington Township, were to lose that mall, I can't even imagine what that would do to our pockets for tax increases. And I hope that people think about that this is a huge source, the mall is a huge source of revenue for Abington Township. Please keep that in mind.
Thank you, Commissioner Myers. Commissioner Vaughn.
So I have a lot of thoughts regarding this whole process. I do think that we should go to the Planning Commission and allow for additional meetings. I have several residents who were unable to get into the meeting, the public meeting that was held, for various reasons. Some said the link did not work. Others felt like they did not have, only 4 questions were taken. So there weren't enough questions allowed to be asked, which I had some very uneasy feelings about that, limiting to 4 people with something so drastic. I have been in this area for, I'm almost 40, so 40 years I have been here. My first job was at the mall. So I don't want to see the mall go. But I do think that there is a lot more conversation that needs to be had with residents. There are a lot more questions that people have. I also do not want to see our taxes increase to the extent where Cheltenham taxes are completely ridiculous because they don't have as much infrastructure as we have here. But there are a lot more things that need to occur. There need to be a lot more conversations that need to be had regarding this. And I've been taking notes on what people have been saying during this meeting. And I do think that we should move to the Planning Commission moving forward. I don't see a problem with moving forward in the process, because it's like if you own a house and you want to move forward with something, you have to start the process somewhere. It does not mean that we are all going to say, yes, let's build these apartments tomorrow. But I don't see a problem with continuing the conversation and moving forward in the process.
Thank you, Commissioner Vaughn. And I agree. And to your point, I think we heard the applicant earlier this evening commit to whatever process we deem appropriate to ensure appropriate public input before a final decision was made. And I know that that is something that is important to every member of this board. We've heard multiple people speak about that tonight. So I appreciate your comments. Do we have any other comments or questions from members of the committee? We do not. So what I've heard most consistently, not from everyone, but the folks that have spoken out, is that there is support for a process to move forward. And we heard from the chair of the Land Use Committee and a couple of other commissioners that believe the appropriate first step in that process would be to refer this to the Planning Commission. And so unless someone feels differently, then I would offer a motion in that regard to move this forward to the Planning Commission. Am I correct in that, Solicitor Clark or Manager Manfredi? Oh, no, this has got to go to the board. So we're supporting a motion to go to the board.
It would be to move
the
it
board to
it'd be move
approve,
it to
take it to the Planning Commission.
Right.
See, even the chair of this committee is figuring out how this works. And so we'll get there eventually. So then the motion would be for this to appear on the January 14th, 2021 board meeting. And the motion would be for the next step in this process to be moving this to the Planning Commission. So I make that motion. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. And thank you to the applicants for being here this evening. We appreciate the information.
Thank you, and thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Yep. And we will now move to the final agenda item in what has proven to be a marathon evening. And this is item G. And we are going to consider and discuss creating a vehicular and pedestrian safety study team. And for that, I'm going to turn to Commissioner Carswell along with Commissioners Rothman and Bull. We'll start with Commissioner Carswell.
Thank you, Vice President Hecker. To my colleagues, I will not be offended if I see you stand up and do a stretch break or, wiggle around, because this has definitely been a long night. I think we're living in the shoes of our children who are Zooming all day long for school. So just got to say that because I'm getting a little stiff as it is.
Yep.
So I will get right to it. I've had conversations with all of you about traffic safety issues in each of our wards. And we've said it many times before, it's the single most pervasive complaint from residents, speeding, cut through traffic, and other challenges. From my own experience, I have hopped in the car back when we could be together with each other with Commissioner Brodsky, and we drove over to look at a spot he was advocating for an experimental stop sign over by Lorimer Park. I've been with Commissioner Rothman at the Fox Chase intersection closest to Alvathorpe, looking at sidewalks and lack of sidewalks and how to make sure that residents can safely cross and walk to the park they want to spend time in without getting run over by high speed on that road. I've also hosted several meetings in my home, again, back when we could do that last year. I had a large map printed of Ward 10 and sat down with residents from all over, many of them who'd never sat with each other before. And we talked about the pain points in our neighborhood and the roads that cause the most grief. We marked up that map, and then I sat with Officer Freed and his colleagues and looked at that map and talked about what the residents were bringing up and talked about what areas we had opportunities to make improvements, and we've made some of those improvements. In June of 2019, the police department presented our current practice. They very specifically pointed out that it was a draft policy in how we manage traffic safety concerns in our community. It had a limited scope. It was very much focused on enforcement and engineering, and it did not resolve the issues. We continue to have questions about various types of engineering. We have questions about how to improve things on a more global scale and how to deal with things that are right in front of someone's house. Our police have worked tirelessly. We drive them probably a little crazy from time to time. I'm sure Officer Freed is smiling as I say that because we have talked a lot. But I truly feel like their hands are tied because the nature of the problem is far beyond an enforcement issue. Our current problem stands with a lack of a policy that really serves us well. So what I started to do about 2 months ago was I sought the input from a number of commissioners who regularly share their concerns with me about this, and we discussed shared goals about this policy. And so what I want to share with you are some highlights out of the document that is in the agenda tonight. And then I'm going to, after I share my comments, I want to send it over to my two colleagues who've helped me the most with this process thus far. So the express purpose of what is a very wordy titled committee, the Vehicular and Pedestrian Safety Study Team, we'll make up some nickname like or something silly, but it's to bring together a diverse and collaborative team of community leaders, including township staff, elected officials, and advisors from relevant county and state government agencies, with the purpose of being to create a comprehensive 21st century traffic calming policy for our township. I think that alone is a big task. And so what I wanted to do is also point out the very specific action items, the objectives of that group. We want to see this team study and document best practices. We want to identify viable options that serve our township in 3 primary areas of public education, enforcement, and engineering solutions. We want to create a forum for public input. We want residents and business owners to weigh in this process. We want to advance and expand existing relationships between the township and some of our external partners who would be key drivers in us being successful. There are experts in traffic safety and enforcement in the area that have participated in conversations before and want to get them back at that table and help us with this policy writing. Those partners are going to include government officials, they're going to include corporations, research agencies, among others. We want to identify commonalities and differentiators among the many and varied communities in our township. We know that Ward 2 is not like Ward 5, it is not like Ward 11. There are components of our township that are distinctly different because of the roads that run through them. And so we want to look at what traffic calming needs are across the township and how they best serve some areas and how they don't serve other areas. And then at the end, we want to draft and present a traffic safety policy to the board to be reviewed and adopted to best serve our township. So I told you I'd be brief. I'm going to now pass it off to Commissioner Rothman to explain a little bit more about the structure that we're proposing and to speak to the timing of this committee.
Thanks, Commissioner Carswell. My the biggest complaint I get from residents, and it's even during COVID, has been relating to traffic safety. I've committed to working hard on trying to do something. We know that not every resident is going to be satisfied with what we get done. I think it's been far too long that we have really struggled to get anything done in many locations in various wards. Before us tonight, it is an opportunity to take that first step in doing what's right for our residents in a major area of concern for them and their families, young and old. The concept here includes the objective that Commissioner Carswell set forth, and I know we don't have a lot of time tonight. I think it's already the third night of Hanukkah, but this will be it's conceptual at this point, right? And we want everybody's input, but 5 commissioners serving on a committee is concept. Very important that we're seeking input from the public. These are the people that come to us. These are the people that we serve. These are people that really give us the ideas of what, number one, what the problems are, but number two, what they'd like to see. Now, we can't just do what they want, right? We need to speak with key stakeholders, experts within township staff. We have that within the police department and other departments. It's collaborative, right? And county, Commonwealth players as well. Meetings will be public. Anybody that's concerned about what we're trying to do from a resident standpoint, or anybody that's just interested in the vision that we're all going to come up with, they're going to have it right there. The goal, ambitious as it may be, and frankly, that's what the folks that voted us all in are asking us to be ambitious at getting things done, is to complete the process, get a final policy review and adoption of something in maybe July of 2021. There's no mandate that has to be final. If we need to push something back because we've got great ideas from those players that we're talking about, yeah, that's awesome. There's no better time than the present for this, and we've all experienced a lot of different things that are going on related to the pandemic, and we need to be preparing for when we quote unquote come out of this. There are folks still on the road, of course, but things will increase, things will pick up, and frankly, after sitting around for a year, people will be in a rush to get back to do things, and we want to have something in place that we can address. Now, granted, we just voted tonight to have no tax increase. The dollars are not there for doing what a lot of residents would like to see, what we would like to see, what the people that we're going to bring in and participate in this discussion would like to see. But we have to have this in place because there will be a day when we can do that again. There will be a day when we have a grant and we have some flexibility in what we're able to do with that grant. Throughout the pandemic, I've been overwhelmed and impressed with the work that our township personnel has done. And we need to be right there with them and doing things in our legislative role. We can't sit back. Our board is always looking for ways to do good things. I certainly commend and really appreciate what Commissioner Schreiber mentioned tonight, that we'll be hearing from Chief Malloy next month. I think that's great and integral to doing our jobs as commissioners. Many of us have food drives that we're participating in or promoting. This is something else that we need to do because that's what we were quote unquote hired to do. Yeah, so I mean, overall, I just want to say that to me, this is a collaborative effort. I don't have the answers. I don't know that any of us here right now have the answers, but collaboratively, we will get the answers. We will get things done, and we will make things better as to this major concern that our residents have. And really do appreciate everyone coming together to get this going. That's all I have on this, and I'm willing to talk to anybody, whether it's the public or other colleagues as we move forward with this process, hopefully getting something going. But for now, that's it from me. And I know Commissioner Bull has some comments as well.
Thanks, Commissioner Rothman. I think before we open this up for public discussion, I think I'll frame my comments a couple different ways. I'll try to not be repetitive of some of the things that have been said before. I'd like to add a little bit of perspective on the initial thoughts of how this is an expansion of the ongoing efforts right now, and then a little bit about timing as well. I think that as you know, one of the things that I learned very quickly in my 11 months on the board is that traffic safety is really considered what I would describe as an evergreen issue, right? It always has been there, and it always is going to be there. And so that can lull one into a sense of there not necessarily being a sense of urgency. There's a lot to focus on during the pandemic, as Commissioner Rothman talked about. We need to be able to echo and mimic the great work of the township that are still carrying out their everyday duties and doing everything they can, while also addressing the needs that are specific to the pandemic and the time that we're in right now. So I think that the time is right now. I want to start really quickly by acknowledging the long time work that's been done by many here. I know that there are a lot of people, both within the township and on the board here, who've been at this for a long time. And I think this is not necessarily solving a past problem. This is building on the good work that's already taking place and looking at this as an opportunity to expand. And the thing before we go into discussion here that I want you to keep in mind from all of our comments is very alliterative, and Commissioner Carswell talked about it, and that's the idea of education, engineering, and enforcement. The first meeting that I had with the APD, with the chief and deputy chief, Melissa Gargan walked into the room, looking like she was at the gym curling 40 pounds, but what it actually was a printout of all the requests that had been made of the police department for traffic safety. And for my money, the model that we've got right now, although responsive to township residents and although there is a system, is not scalable. It's not scalable as it is right now. And one of the things that I would love to do is to help us lead a discussion that can provide a framework, optionality, and can help drive budget discussions for what we can do, should do, and need to do. And let me dive really quickly into those 3 E's. So education. Education works. We know that APD has made several good faith efforts to put lawn signs up, to release statements. We know education is worth investing in. And I'll tell a really quick story, and a couple colleagues are going to be bored with this story, but I think it holds water. In the late it was in the mid 1980s, the state of Texas was finding that they were spending, the Department of Transportation, $20 million a year to clean up litter on the side of the roads. $20 million a year. The costs were increasing by about 17% per year. And it was escalating out of proportion to what they had available. Now, they didn't look at that issue and say, well, we just need to keep spending more money and do things the same way. What they did was step back, gather data, and realize that men in trucks ages 18 to 25 who were really proud to be Texans were driving along the Texas highways and throwing their trash out the window. So what they did was come back with a marketing campaign. They put out an RFP, they got a couple proposals back, and so was born the Don't Mess with Texas slogan. We know that communication works. We've got a dedicated colleague here on the board who every time we're up in meetings has got a sign behind him, and he reminds us at the end of the meetings to slow down and drive slower in Abington. Education works. Hopefully this policy and procedure deliverable document can factor in what a concerted educational effort that engages the broad community, has branding to it, has messaging to it, and really foists this conversation into the public domain can do. So that's number one. Engineering, I think that at least from my estimation, I think we have an opportunity to expand our conversation and to look at some of the options. Commissioner Rothman is absolutely correct. There is not a lot of money right now to do the kinds of things that individual residents might want. However, what I observe is that too often people are associating, traffic's going too fast, I need a stop sign, or people are going too fast, I need a speed hump. And there's a middle ground, and the middle ground is the question, what can I do to curb traffic in my community? Well, we can only answer that question if people are educated on the full scope of things. So it would be wonderful to have a document that laid out what each of these things cost, what the approval procedure would be to get them through, and what the actual procedure would be to implement them. To do that, we really need to explicitly bring in a lot of engineer experts and bring them into the conversation. I know they're a part of the conversations right now, but to put together something that's proactive and that residents can have to consult on a regular basis would be absolutely wonderful. Related to that, I do think this could also drive budget discussions. I know that we are at a point now where money's tight, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have a discussion not about what we had and what we could do, but rather who we wanted to be and what we wanted to do. If we had some more data and said, we feel really confident that over the course of the next 5 years, if we did X, Y, and Z, we think we could slow down traffic in this area, slow down traffic volume in this area, and make the residents more safe, that would be wonderful. And we could use that plan. It would absolutely need to be coordinated and factored into the work of the strategic plan that we're doing and the comprehensive plan. But it's going to require a lot of research. It's going to require a lot of effort. It's going to require a lot of engagement of the public and our experts within the township. And so we need to start that work now. And then lastly, enforcement. I think that it would be wonderful if we were to offer the resources within our Abington Police Department the opportunity to have more voices at the table in a very explicit way. I look at this as bringing more resources to the issue and really creating opportunity to engage the public in a deliberate way about how robust the enforcement activities are right now. And in the end, I don't really think of this as 3 legs of a stool so much as 3 sort of elements of a rope that are interwoven, and together they're really strong. And if you pull one of them out, the whole thing frays a little bit. I think that what we would want to do is really focus in the realm of education, engineering, and enforcement, and overlay that with 2 more E's, and this is my last comments, evaluation and economics. We have to be budget conscious, but we shouldn't let it be self-limiting. And we have to evaluate this stuff on data. There's millions and millions of dollars spent on a national level. I've done a lot of research and have found really good policies out there that I'd love to use as examples. I already have an email into someone in Bellevue, Washington. They've got a great traffic safety policy. So we can do research, we can come together, and we'd love your support on this and love your questions and love for your help in shaping this as a next step in making our residents more safe.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioners Carswell, Rothman, and Bull. I will now open this up for comments and questions from other members of the committee. Commissioner Thompson.
Commissioner Hecker?
Yes. And then Commissioner DePlacido is next.
Thank you, Commissioner Hecker. I just want to commend Commissioners Carswell, Commissioner Bull, and Commissioner Rothman for their work on this so far. I think this is a very important program that they're establishing. I think it's very beneficial. I think talking about these 3 E's, the concept of engineering, enforcement, and education are all critical. And I think that there's something that's been kind of missing from the dialogue that we've been having with the public before. And I think that, especially in terms of education, I think it works kind of both ways. As a board, we want to make sure that the public is educated about the importance of driving safely within our township. But I think we also want to make sure that our fellow commissioners and the administrative staff are really understanding of what tools they have at their availability, what tools we can put into the toolkit for them. There are things out there, there are abstract traffic calming measures that exist in this world, like a WUNRF that, probably would never end up in this township, but a lot of you probably don't even know what a WUNRF is. So having these discussions, talking through some of the engineering solutions that exist out there is critical. And then trying to understand how they overlay within our own individual wards, I think is really something that we need to do And we need to do it in a public forum, and we need to do it with our residents. So thanks for all the hard work. And I fully support seeing this move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner DePlacido.
Thanks, Vice President Hecker. I have a couple questions for you. I want to know what is this? Is this a board? Is this a committee? Is this a team? What exactly is this?
Vice President Hecker, I'm happy to take a quick
Please
crack
feel free,
at that.
Commissioner. Please do.
Attached with the agenda was a draft outline for what effectively is being called a study team, with the idea being it's a committee. It would be appointing 5 commissioners to serve, 2 to co-chair, to then work collaboratively with township staff and invite residents to participate in the process during public information gathering sessions, and to work with experts, both local and on a larger state level, to influence the drafting of a policy. I have sort of mapped out sort of the core components of what would need to happen on a monthly basis before getting to July, with that including public meetings, with it including engagement with best practices, like Commissioner Bowl said, talking to some municipalities that have great experience with this, or maybe have had really bad experiences with this, and say, hey, listen to this. This is not what you want to do. Or looking at the data that we have here in our township. Literally, as I'm speaking to you, I'm getting texts from Chief Malloy, who's making sure I have different data points. I appreciate. There's a lot of opportunity to make this process very collaborative, but the end goal is, the end of what I'm presenting to you tonight with my peers here is a committee that would be 5 commissioners appointed, with a project timeline of getting a policy drafted to be put in front of the board by July.
Commissioner Carswell, I think it's also important to note that this would end, right? This is not a proposal for a permanent committee. It's not replacing anything. It's a project-based group with an end date and a deliverable.
Yes, thank you. That's a really important piece. Some of the PennDOT handbook on traffic calming does talk about committees that can be review boards, if you will, that could have public serving on them. That's not what this is. This is a project committee to create the policy.
And Jess, Commissioner Carswell, we gotta be formal. I don't know if it was stated, or maybe just clarifying it, but this isn't public safety only. This isn't public affairs only, nor is it just public works only. The concept of getting a policy in place is to address traffic safety, but the means by which the vision is there to get this done, it's really pulling in the resources that we have from all different dynamics, as well as the input. I mean, we had that meeting a few years ago, and the concepts that were shared with different departments. I mean, I don't think anybody wants something to go in place that would be strongly opposed by our police department or strongly opposed by the fire department. We need to work collaboratively with them, just like we do on other things, just like we were working with the police and fire on Commissioner Thompson's the rental inspections. I think the vision here that we're having is just saying, like, we got awesome people on this board, and we have awesome people working at the township and leading these powerful, when I say powerful, I mean influential departments. I certainly don't envision doing much more in any role in this than directing concepts and discussion and getting the most out of what we have right in front of us, including, all 14 of my commissioner colleagues. So I think it's more like in a way, it's like a task force. And the task is, let's get this done right so that we have a policy that can obviously be changed over time if it's working, certain things that are working or not. But to one day look back, our group of commissioners that's here tonight, and say, you know what, we really did something awesome there to help people with what is the major concern for most of them, if not their number one concern. Thanks.
Commissioner DiPlacido, did you have other questions?
I did, and I thank you very much for your responses. Just please indulge me, if you will, because I don't know a whole lot about this committee. This is kind of first hearing about it this week. So it's a task force, actually, and if that's what you want to call it. And Commissioner Bowl said, like, the magic word, the deliverables. That's something that every committee strives for, and is to deliver to our constituents and to the township. I just want to, get a feeling of, what this group or this task force exactly is, and how it also relates to the current committee with the, which I used to be a member of, the public safety. Like, where's the tie in there? If we're talking like legislation or ordinance or things like that, is the task force, poised to make recommendations and then move that to committee? Like, are we creating another like bureaucratic step in order to get a stop sign, or can't we just go to the safety committee and Officer Freed and the police department and say we need a stop sign? So, like, where's this level fall, and how does it respond to the current committee? I'll leave it right there.
Yeah, but let me take a crack, and then others can join in. And this is just my understanding, because I think you're right. I mean, I don't think we want to be in the business of creating additional bureaucracy. But on the flip side of that, sometimes large-scale policy initiatives require a focused effort in order to get them to the place where they can be implemented. And I would view, and I'm speaking for myself, not anybody else, but I would view, any of the work that would be done by this committee, I think would come forward to the group that we're at right now, the committee of the whole. Like, we're deciding everything else that comes forward to see whether, what a recommendation is ready for prime time, or if we want, in fact, a specific recommendation to get a deeper dive. And I think, that's the beauty of the meeting that we're having now. We as a group get to decide collectively what we think needs to happen in order to get an agenda item or a substantive issue ready for final voting and vetting. And that would be my view. But I'd also would ask or allow, Commissioners Carswell, Rothman, or Bowl to weigh in.
Commissioner Hecker.
Yeah, Mr. Manfredi. Yes.
May I help?
Your help is always welcome.
I think the answer to Commissioner DiPlacido's question is that all of those things that are happening now, with those things that he mentioned, as they happen, would continue. Now, would that change as a result of the policy that gets developed? That's what's up for discussion, and what the study team or task force would end up creating. But it's not to interfere with any of the current processes that are in place, or that's been in place over the last certainly 3 or 3.5 years, or 5 years or 10 years. It's really, I think they've all said it, but Commissioner Ball, I thought, was particularly on point with that. It's a deliverable of a policy with very specific goals. The scope and duties are clear in the document that's in your meeting binder. So I think that, I don't think it's meant, Commissioner DiPlacido, from what I've learned, especially in the last week, to replace anything that is being done, but meant to build upon what is being done and see if there is additional ways to either improve current processes that are in place or add new processes. And I don't mean to put words in the 3 commissioners who've created this, but I think that's what I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It does, more or less. I'm just trying to get an understanding and of the relationship between this task force and the actual committee. I'm sorry, I have a couple more questions.
Please proceed.
How so you said there's 5 commissioners. How are they selected? And then is that group responsible for the selection of the other people, like the experts, the engineers, police officers, public? How does that work? How does the nomination committee work?
So I'll take a crack at that, and others, including President Spiegelman, can weigh in. I think this would be considered to be an ad hoc committee, and this would be an administrative appointment, and that would be at the discretion of the president of the board.
Yeah, I mean, the president and the vice president.
Okay, that's easy enough. All right, and again, I want to leave it with this too. I don't want it to sound like I'm against this committee. It's just that I don't want to add any type of level, like we just use the word bureaucracy, into something that we can fix right away. I've had many successes with our police department and the public safety committee in general in getting things done for my particular ward. It's are we going to stop that nut driver that's speeding through the neighborhood? No, but there are measures that we've taken and we've worked collaboratively together already. So I needed to know what level this added to that level we're already communicating on. Is it something that is actually needed? Is it something that I'd like to be a part of?
Yep. Or
is it something that it's just it adds more red tape? So those are my thoughts. Thank you. Thank you very much for answering.
No, I appreciate the comments. And I would offer one other, and then I'll let them answer as well. I think one of the things that I've heard in this discussion is that vehicular and pedestrian safety is largely a public safety issue, but not exclusively a public safety issue. And this may have the opportunity to bring together the Public Safety Committee, the Public Works Committee, and the Public Affairs Committee on all of the issues that would need to be focused on in order, to enact a comprehensive policy, along with, cooperating with the police department on continued education. So it's sort of a bridge between the various emphases of the committees that would have some role in anything that we would do moving forward. I saw Commissioner Schreiber had her hand up.
Thank you. I had to unmute there. So yes, we certainly all have traffic issues, and there are some very good things out of this about having education and engineering get involved. I think all of that is very positive. My questions, some were already answered, but are kind of practical in nature. So we just heard how the members would be selected. I'm a little surprised. I too have done a lot of research on this and looked at many similar ad hoc committees in different places. I think I mentioned some of them to Bill already. Usually the way that these have been constructed are like with 2 commissioners and then a couple staff members and people from the public who might have expertise, especially because usually the people on the board themselves don't have that expertise. So I guess I'm wondering why the 5 members of the commissioner, and are the other people that are going to be on the committee, like citizens who might be on the committee, how are they going to be chosen? Yeah, I'll leave it at that for right now.
I can take this one.
Certainly.
So what we're presenting is 5 commissioners serving on the committee. We're suggesting that there should be very intentional input sessions for the public to participate in. That could come in any number of ways. That could be kind of like how the comprehensive plan held sessions throughout the township. Obviously, that might be a virtual throughout the township. It could come in the form of a series of public meetings where everyone comes together in sort of one room. It depends on really the format that best serves collecting that information. But it is not a committee. I'm not presenting the idea of having citizens serve on that committee. And likewise, not suggesting having townships serve on that committee. And I'll just be very personal about this. I have worked in the nonprofit sector for a long time. I have been a staff member who has worked very closely with all of the boards that I have for the different organizations I've worked for. And the worst committee experiences are when you have staff who serve through a chain of command, who have a supervisor and duties they're supposed to perform, have to turn around and serve on a committee and report to a committee chair. It's just, there's no, it's not helpful to them. And I think that the ability to create a collaborative and inclusive process does not require people to sit in a designated seat on a committee. But what it does require is conversation and intentionality in those conversations, and bringing people together to look at those details. I had a conversation yesterday with Officer Freed, and he mentioned to me that this is not a unique process. In fact, it's something he has brought to the township's attention before several years ago, because it's something that many municipalities have endeavored to do. I believe very recently, Cheltenham has undergone this process. In bringing this together and setting up a unique committee for this comes from my own experience on this board of knowing that when you have a really important project, you need to have a really focused attention on it. And so I think it's important that this be a committee that has a designated singular purpose, and that is this project.
Jess, Commissioner Carswell, just adding on that, to agree with and also address one of Commissioner DiPlacido's points, the good things that we can do, I would envision, would still be able to be done. No one is trying to undo anything that is working. Some things don't. Some things we need to be creative about. Some things we need to literally sit down and ask people, does this work? Does it not? Or where can it work? Why wouldn't it work here? That kind of thing. And it's not, it's, again, I can only speak for myself, but it's not with any set agenda behind it all. I certainly have some areas in my ward that are the ones I get the volume of calls about from people who, whether they live on that street or not. But it takes some creativity, and at times, I have the same experience in my professional career. If you want to get a certain thing addressed, sometimes you need to just think about that only. And I think we've done a good job as a public safety committee. I think there's a lot of great things we've done. And I don't think this is in any way a reflection on that. I'm proud to serve on that committee. And I think great things have been done and still will be done. I just think this is a little different. And it's more of like a hybrid type of thing, which it is what I'm seeing all over the place in 2020. So many different areas are meshing together. And, I certainly have a lot to learn in adapting now in my 40s to the ways of the kids, as they say. But I just think this is a great idea. And I think there's going to be some good things that come with it. I think all your questions were good, Jimmy. But I think that there's a lot of good intention here, and I think the focus on getting something done and then disbanding the whatever the entity is going to be called or committee, it's good. It's a let's get this done, get out of the way, let's bring it to everybody, and we want the input from all our colleagues. That's why it's great that we're having this discussion now. I think the committee of the whole is a great concept in itself.
Thank you, Commissioner Rothman. Commissioner Spiegelman.
Thank you, Vice President Hecker. I want to say I definitely think there are some important, for me, an important caution came out of Commissioner DiPlacido's comments, and I think also reflected in Commissioner Schreiber's comments as well. but I'm going to use a specific example Commissioner DiPlacido gave about, things like the experimental stop signs, things that have already been accomplished. I think it's important that the proposed committee would not set up any kind of, as Commissioner DiPlacido phrased it, a bureaucratic barrier. And I think it would probably be very easy to prevent that from happening. Speaking purely for myself, I have long been a giant pain to Officer Freed, and in various traffic safety requests, and I admit to a real myopia over the years, where I myself have been very focused on speed bumps or humps or cushions, and sort of that's the be all end all. And reading the very well thought out presentation, write up and presentation by Commissioners Carswell, Rothman, and Bohl, I see that I appreciate a broader view that isn't focused on just one. It's not micro focused on just one thing, but it is targeted to this specific area, and also with the limited scope. It's not a body that would exist forever. In addition, listening to listening to Commissioner Rothman's comments, and I think maybe also Commissioner Bohl's as well. I recognize that there already is crossover between certain aspects of public safety automatically with public works. I mean, the police themselves don't put up stop signs or figure out how traffic signals can be wired in and get the power that they need. All of that is already collaborative with public works, and I find it appealing, especially hearing this discussion from everybody. I find it appealing that this really positions three areas: public works, public safety, public affairs, to kind of work synthetically, for want of a less meaningless term. But anyway, I'm really excited to see where this goes, and I want to thank the commissioners for the presentation, and also the excellent questions that everybody asked, because they really got me thinking.
President Spiegelman, could I
move forward?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm good.
If I could, I want to really try hard to not be repetitive here and add value. We're coming up on 10 o'clock here. But to that point, and I think Commissioner DiPlacido, to the really good point and questions that you asked earlier about the good work that's already taking place, I would want to refer back to the scalability issue of this. And I think that one of the things that I've learned working in big bureaucracies for a really long time is that just because collaboration happens doesn't mean that A, it will always happen, or B, it's happening in the scale or in a way that's sustainable, right? We've got good people at the township working together. We owe them, as leaders and liaisons between the community and them, to provide direction that is both enabling and empowering for them, but also protective of them. If you go onto the APD's website, there are 76 vehicular traffic study safeties posted on the website. Amazing. All very transparent, all right there. It hints at and points to the great work that's happening. There are 2 of the 76 that are definitively actionable, right? Now, what this means is there are residents asking questions. Cars are going too fast. Do a traffic safety study. In 74 of the 76, it was found through doing a traffic safety study that the average speed going through a particular intersection was not warranting significant activity. Now, does that mean that the residents are wrong? No. I mean, they're observing something that's happening and they're bringing that to the attention of the APD. Does it mean that the data is wrong? No. It certainly doesn't mean that the data is wrong. But there are probably unasked questions in all of that. I've got several intersections where the average speed through some of these speed studies has been below the threshold for significant enforcement activity to take place. But unsaid in those conversations so far, and it's not through anyone's fault, it's just that there's not a system to support it right now, are asking questions like, is that a bus stop? Are there significant amounts of children who live in that intersection? Is the street exceptionally wide? So if you're pushing a stroller across the street, does it take a really long time to get across the street? Are there blind turns that even if someone's going the speed limit, they might not be able to see someone coming down the street? So to bring a team together and to be able to, as a board, provide some structural direction to how these things would be addressed is one aspect. And that's Commissioner DiPlacido. I think I really do appreciate you asking us to sort of frame this and make it real a little bit. So that's the liaison part back to the township. The liaison part back to the public is that they would have a handbook, a guidebook to say, I'm really concerned about this intersection. What the heck could happen? What could I do? Well, if they go on to the website, they look at what the options are, they might see, or their neighbor might say, you should get some of those speed cushions. Well, left unsaid in all of that is the fact that as Commissioner Rothman alluded to earlier, the fire department might be really, really concerned about a speed cushion in an area that might delay, and Commissioner Myers brought this up several meetings ago, that might delay first responders from getting to someone's home. Like, that needs to be a part of this document in the public sphere. So I really see this as a facilitation of a process and really sitting truly between the public and the excellent township staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Bull. Are there other or further comments from members of the committee? Okay, so hearing none, I think what we're voting on then would be to move this forward again to the January 14th, 2021 meeting for formal review and vote by the Board of Commissioners. And so I will make that motion and ask for a second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, we have now come to the end of our agenda for this evening at exactly 10 p.m. on Thursday, December 10th. I appreciate everyone's focus and energy. There was a lot discussed and a lot accomplished tonight. This will be our final group meeting before the holidays. So happy holidays to everybody. I hope everyone is safe and healthy during the next couple of weeks. And we will look to get back at this in the early part of January. And so we are officially adjourned. Good evening.
But I have a slideshow.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Can I show a slideshow? Good.
Night.
Very good slideshow. Be well, everybody.
Good night.
I had a few comments.
Happy holidays.
I'll make them next time.
Raise, you gotta raise your hand.
I didn't know I had to raise my hand.
Raise your hand.